Kate, important to close up
Good evening, Holliston. Welcome to the June 7th, 2021 Select Board meeting. Tonight we have a very full agenda, and we're going to kick it off right away with the high school statement of interest agenda item. And tonight we have Dr. Pesca, we have the school committee chair, Stacey Raffi, and we have the business manager, Keith Boudet. All three are welcome to come to the table. And we're looking forward to your presentation whenever you're ready.
I know they have a copy of it, so they're going to queue it up.
Okay, all right.
So while they queue it up, can I just take a minute to thank Chief Stone and Chief Cassidy? They were some of the masterminds behind the graduation parade, as well as graduation yesterday. I know the planning was arduous, and I know that you had to make some tough decisions. But at the end of the day, we had two very successful and safe events. And so on behalf of the school committee, I thank you.
A lot of heroes behind the scenes, for sure.
Right, and that includes you and all of your staff, but I don't know all their names. You get the drift.
Well, thank you. And actually, I know that last year the statement of interest had gone forward for approval as well. And I'm going to walk you through where we've been since that time and see if we can get approval for a new statement of interest for this year. Thank you. So the building is 52 years old. Now, when I arrived last year and took my walk around for the first time, I would not have believed that. Unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, when you walk into that building, it's been very well maintained by our staff and with the renovation process. So visibly, it looks pretty nice on the inside. It's very clean. You're not seeing leaky roofs. You're not seeing a lot of damage. And that's really a credit to our staff. In all honesty, the reason, the 2001 renovation that's referenced up here is indicative of why it doesn't look like it's in disrepair. And the building is not in disrepair. It's not an unsafe building, but what it is, it's not educationally sound for students in the 21st century. Next slide, please. You can just put the whole thing up. So that was what the building was like in 1969. And then in 2001, $26 million was put into a renovation project. So good and bad, right? Because we did that renovation in 2001, the building looks pretty sound and is in pretty good shape. The facilities were upgraded, a lot of infrastructure, cosmetically, and then the desktop equipment, which back then was high technology. I can't even imagine how long ago it seems now, that Pentium 3 processors that many of us had. But what wasn't done was the septic system and leaching field, and that is a serious concern moving forward long term. So I think those pictures themselves tell the story. That's what things were like in 1969. And then the 2001 renovation, we still had a lot of computer labs, and now kids are interacting with technology right in front of the class, all over the class, in the hallways. When I walk into all of the buildings now, I see children in the hallways working. And if it's in the high school, a lot of the reason that they are working in the hallways is because there are no small spaces, which I'm going to talk to a little bit further on. So Keith, you want to talk to the infrastructure needs?
Yes, many of these are on our CIP project plan right now. Some of them aren't because they're either not, they're not within the next 5 years, or some of them would not be on a capital improvement plan, for repairs and things, such as like the tennis courts near the bottom. I mean, again, we're one of the few communities or one of the few school districts in the Tri-Valley doesn't have their own home tennis courts. So it's things of that nature. But again, you can see that there's, and I've updated this since the last time it came forward, you can see there's a number of projects that, we may not want to pay for if we were lucky enough to come forward with the SOI project. Some of these are going to have to happen. I mean, it's kind of like how Community Appeal has to happen. It's that sort of process where, again, some things will be needed, like the replace boilers. I mean, we will hit that point. And at that point, when we do, we have to evaluate whether we go with the accelerated repair program, which we're still not eligible for boilers, or do we, or do we kind of bleed until we get to the next phase. So again, it's Travis will recognize a lot of these things from his plan, and again, we'll keep moving forward and keep preparing things as they break.
Right. I mean, unfortunately, if we spend $11 million in the short term, it doesn't help us with our long-term concerns. And obviously, if we could get a long-term solution in place, we could reduce this number significantly. That's a picture of the building today. So recently, the high school had a committee together, and they developed a vision of a graduate. And I'm going to read it, since people may not be able to read that. The Holliston Public Schools, in partnership with our community, are committed to supporting students on their journey to live healthy, meaningful, and productive lives. Through our pre-K to 12 plus curriculum and experiences, our students will become engaged global citizens, innovative thinkers, effective communicators, and lifelong learners who exemplify character and live balanced lives. So if that is the vision, how do we get there? And you'll hear me in the fall talk about our strategic planning process, which I'm not really focusing on today, but we're going to be starting a new strategic plan that will go 5 years out, and I'll be asking some of our community stakeholders to be part of that, including the vision of the graduate and where the high school needs to be in the next 5 years will be part of that plan and have a budgetary piece to it, and all of these dots connect to that end. So I won't read all of these, but the vision of a graduate does include the 6 areas of global citizen, balanced life, lifelong learner, innovative thinker, character, and effective communicator. I just put some pictures up there that show what high schools of today that are being built look like. They are nothing like the classrooms that I think most of us went to, certainly myself, where we were in rows. Now, ironically, this year we actually went back to looking more like a high school as a path with our students in rows because of COVID, but that's not the ideal learning opportunity, as you know. These high schools are innovative and have collaborative learning spaces for students, technology embedded. They're much more flexible so students can learn in various ways. So how do we meet the needs of the 21st century learner, even though the building looks okay? It has outdated and flexible science labs and classroom spaces, inefficient expansive building designs. The black box theater, that's a smaller type theater that we can have much more community offerings. We don't always need a huge place to put on shows, but having kids that can show, we really want to focus on the arts in the future. Inadequate student collaboration spaces, those are those small workspaces that I referred to that are not just in the traditional classroom spaces that we have. 1 dozen interior classrooms, and we certainly don't have enough storage and meeting spaces for all teachers, admin, and students. Phys ed and athletic facilities, while we do have the field house, it's still insufficient to meet the needs of our program. So what do we do with all that? The timeline again, 1969, and then the renovation in 2001. Today, 52 years later, we have some questions to be answered. How do we address deficiencies separately, or do we take a comprehensive solution, which is what we're here to talk about today, the statement of interest. So the statement of interest, if we move forward and get approved, then we would need a feasibility study. Well, actually, I'll let you talk about the feasibility study because you've been in that process before, have you not?
Yes. So again, what it does, it looks at all options. The way the MSBA works, it doesn't assume a new building. It makes the assumption that it invites you in that a project is due. And the project could be a renovation, it could be a renovation addition, where they say you don't have enough space like this, so we're going to renovate this section and add a X. Or it could be a new building. Part of the feasibility study will be based around that. It's not based on affordability, even though money does come with it. But again, they're going to make a recommendation. They're going to map out all 3, make a recommendation, and at that point, we would sit down as a community with them and make the determination on basically which path to go. They may feel more strongly about one path than another. Or they may say, this is what we're willing to offer you. But again, there will be community involvement. So.
And it would come down, to some extent, money. If you're spending too much to do a renovation, then they would recommend the full process to go forward. So the way they fund these projects is with the 6.25% sales tax. The mission is collaborating with municipalities to equitably invest in finding the right size, most fiscally responsible, and educationally appropriate solutions to create safe, sound, and sustainable learning environments. The minimum amount they'll contribute to these projects is 31%. Holliston, as of 2019, we get reimbursed at 48.05%. Now, that may change in the near future, but that is the latest amount that we've been told since 2019. Do you have anything to add to that, Keith?
No, again, it's that was we didn't request another great thing. They're a little busy with their problems with COVID as well. I mean, they're just one of the reasons everything also got pushed back. We're talking in June submission is supposed to, May submission, so that's part of it.
So the 48%, for
I-
every $1 invested by the town, 48 cents is coming back from
From
the state.
yes,
Got
and I don't expect that number to change dramatically. In general, it doesn't have large fluctuations, so, if it was 2 years later, is it 47.5, is it 48.5? I would expect that type of range difference, and not a huge one.
So we did include the core program process overview, and Keith had put together a packet for you as well that we shared tonight. So I'm not going to read through all of that. Just suffice to say that we would start by submitting the statement of interest by June 25th, and then we would have to wait to find out if we're going to be approved, and then we would walk you through the next steps. So either way, Stacy pointed out the other night where those two check boxes are. Even if we start the process, if we come to the end of, yes, you're accepted for your statement of interest, now what? We could move forward and say we're going to go to the next step, or at that point we could say the town is not interested at that point. Or later on, when we get to Module 5, again, even if we had started to move the process forward, at that point, again, we would come back to the community and see if we're going to continue the process forward, or if we would agree for whatever reason, finances or otherwise, that this is not the time to move forward.
I mean, the purpose of that process is to allow you multiple off-ramps. So when the project, goes in the direction you may not want it to, or truthfully, if finances within the town change dramatically. So it's not locking you into something, too early in the process for you to feel like you're trapped.
Exactly. It's a lot of fun with that time. So, this past year, we had to wait an extremely long time because they did not vote until April 14th. Originally, wasn't it January 18th that they told us?
Usually it's December 4th.
Yeah.
And then I think they pushed it to January at one point, and then they told us April would be the date. So out of the multiple, I think it was 161, because my eyes cannot see those numbers on the bottom charts, but the pie graph, I think, was 161 proposals were put into MSBA, and out of those, only these three, Neshoba Regional, Tri-County Regional, and Whitman-Hanson Regional had schools approved to have some projects considered moving forward.
And the interesting fact about that is typically a high school project is considerably a larger cost than elementary, so it's not surprising that they only have 3 up there.
Right, and Whitman-Hanson, I only got my stepson graduating there, I believe, has a newer middle school and high school, so I'm assuming it's Indian on one of their elementary schools that has been,
That's definitely their high school. To use their high school as one of the model
it's
schools.
very nice,
So,
very nice.
But it's one of the model
I
schools,
know it
one of
is,
the model
yeah.
programs, so.
Continue, please. So the next step, should you vote to move forward, the school committee has already voted, and I would resubmit the form outlining what we think are the deficiencies in the school building and what are our priorities to begin this process. Can you just continue the whole slide, please? So there are 7 items that are to be considered in SOI. The 2 that we are highlighting would be modernize the building system to increase energy and or decrease energy costs. And then the building no longer provides for full range of programs consistent with state and local educational requirements. Again, visibly, you go into that building, it looks pretty good. It's really about, is it meeting the needs of our students? If we're trying to provide global equity for students and offer more range of programs. And at this time, again, tying into our strategic plan moving forward, where we want to go as a town, as a community, as a school system, all of those things have to be considered so we can get the best opportunities for students in Holliston. So we're not looking for a solution right now. We're looking for an opportunity to state what the problem is. There's no cost to submit this. It does require the school committee and select board vote, and the slides that you have do have the link to last year's approval process, and we'll do that again this year when we submit. And again, I'd have to submit it with, obviously, Keith's help by June 25th, 2021. It will be very similar to what we did last year. And why? This is really the why. Proud to be Holliston, great schools, needs a great community. So this is our partnership opportunity with the town. We're all under one umbrella. My Dorchester accent coming up. But But honestly, really, I mean, this is a partnership between the town and the schools, but we all know that great schools enhance the community, bring up tax values. People move to the community when they hear about the schools. This is an optimal time for us. We've got some new teams coming into the district, hiring a new assistant superintendent, that strategic planning process. We have great bones in our school system. There are so many great things there. This is an opportunity to make the entire school system even greater, which makes a greater community. And Keith, do you have anything to add to that?
Thank you. So what we'll do is take questions from John and Ben or comments and myself, and then we will turn to the Zoom audience to see if there are any questions there, and then we'll move to consider vote after that. So John, do you want to go with any questions?
Yeah, I have several questions, if you don't mind. So thanks very much for coming in this evening. The first question that comes to mind is, in years past, when the proposal is given to us, the superintendent provides a connection between the high school application needs and the SBAB's anchors or areas of interest. Some time ago, there were like about 10 of them, areas that they would look at to score your application against. What areas from what the SBAB currently asks for communities to establish a connection for viability would you say the high school meets that would hopefully give us a successful outcome? What are of those criteria that they laid out?
Truthfully, John, it's the biggest thing. I think you remember. I know you were there when we did the walkthrough, and they were very complimentary of where the building was, which they view as a plus. Just to reduce our need, but this way it's not investing money poorly either. That was one of the people that I was speaking with. I think the areas that they noticed right away, and the biggest area was the fact that the more than 12 interior classrooms. Mm-hmm. That was something that, really they were aghast at seeing, in all honesty. And, that goes to the learning spaces that we do have in the high school. While sufficient enough size-wise and square footage-wise, again, they don't meet both the needs of a 21st century learner. They don't meet some standards that we would certainly expect, which again, we'd like children to actually be able to see sunlight, and
Do those deficiencies affect your accreditation, though?
No, unfortunately, don't be unaccredited, but we do get measured, not annually, every 5 years, as part of the tiered focus monitoring, where they want to make sure that certain populations are not relegated to those spaces. Mm-hmm. And so we have to make sure that there is a fair distribution of student population between all of our more challenged spaces also.
Next question is, and you've alluded to this already, Keith, but I'd like to put an emphasis on it. This application gives the town the opportunity to try to get into a program. Mm-hmm. The program our application doesn't define the fact that we want a new high school. It says we want options. We want the ability to study and evaluate those options. I know you mentioned it, but it's a point of emphasis that I think people listening to should hear if you want to make that point again.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they'll bring in the team, the feasibility study, and they will give us ideas and put the ideas on the table. We'll have engineering looking into the pieces of the puzzle, and really they'll give us multiple options, and those multiple options could be another renovation project, it could be a full project, it could be 3 or 4 different options, and then it would come down to, these are the prices of those options, now what makes the most sense moving forward. If a renovation, let's say, is going to cost us, I don't even know, what was the building that would be estimated, do you have any idea right now? 100?
More than $26 million.
100 million plus, I don't know.
100 million plus.
Let's just say 100 million. So let's say they decide that to renovate the building sufficiently to have equity for students, to deal with ADA compliance, deal with some of our issues with one of the things, parking flow and different things like that. So to deal with all those issues, to do a renovation, maybe it's going to cost $75 million. Mm-hmm. It's not financially viable to put that much into it.
But the feasibility study is going to
tell us all
cook up all the options and give the community choices.
And then the community gets to weigh in at that point.
2 more questions real quickly. How can you, again, Doctor, give parents and taxpayers the assurance that the property is being properly maintained? You made that mention when I did the walkthrough a year or 2 ago, 2-ish maybe. You made a point with the SBAB to show what Holliston High School's maintenance budget looks like, and I know it's linked to the capital budget. Can you speak a little bit about that? Because I think taxpayers especially would not like to think that the asset is being ignored or not properly cared for. Could you speak to that?
Let me just speak to the first thing, and then I'll have to jump in. as I mentioned, when I started here just less than a year ago, one of my first visits to the high school was actually during our retreat in July. We were spending a lot of time there in the air-conditioned auditorium. Now, I had no idea that it was 52 years old because we are maintaining. That is, in a way, it's a drawback. It looks better in person than it is as far as, right, we've done a great job maintaining it because of that renovation that took place in 2001. However, is it meeting the needs of where we think our students of today should be? That's the bigger question and the more important question. If we want to compete with all these other districts that are sending kids to more learning opportunities over time, we need to compete with them by having better spaces for our students.
We've submitted 3 statement of interests in succession. This would be the 4th. Dr. Jackson gave this board a sense when we started that we might be looking at about a 10-year commitment into this cycle. Do you maintain the same outlook? Do you have any expectations of where this particular mission is taking us?
Well, I think Keith might be able to speak to the historical piece more than I can. However, I will say that I've been involved in a couple of different building projects. One when it was already approved and the building was starting, and the tearing down of that building and all the drama that goes along with that. And I've also been in a building project where I was in the beginning process and never was there to see the actual building come to fruition. So I've seen the amount of work, in all honesty, as a superintendent and as an assistant superintendent of finance and operations. Those become full-time jobs to get it to come to fruition, right? That being said, it's worth the effort to put that time in. And the end result, 10 years, I mean, just think of even getting the SOI to go through in the feasibility study. Even if that got approved, you're still looking, 5, 6 years out often.
I'd say probably at least 3 to 5, 3 on a fast track,
as far
5
as
overall.
finishing.
But you know, to get more specific, John, I think that COVID put the damper on at least a year's worth of timing on it. So they only approved really 3 projects this year. That they did a few more in the accelerated repair program. But again, nobody had the time, energy, or possibly the resources because again, it's a resource-intensive, both human as well as capital, resource-intensive process. You know, do I think that were there things when we did the walkthrough on reflection with them? You know, Jack McCarthy said to me specifically that if you go forward with this, you won't be replacing your auditorium. I said, well, why wouldn't we? I got seats from 1969 that were reupholstered in 2001. He says, because you're not going to get a 900-person auditorium again. We don't build it 1 seat for every student. I went, okay. And then another woman came and told me, well, you're not getting a field house again, which I already knew. I didn't know what the auditorium, which I already knew. Because again, that's why we kept the field house as part of the renovation as well, which was, they'll build you a gymnasium, but they're not going to build you a field house. So these are things that, again, where an architect is going to lay out a plan that if we want to maintain pieces of our current assets in a fashion so they'll be usable, to not be a detriment to the community is what it would be, is that, you don't want to lose the field house, you don't want to lose an auditorium of that size, so they would have to come up with a design that worked within the confines of the footprint that we're on to maintain that while, whether it's a renovation, an add rent, or build new, that they would do, so.
And I know they don't fund a central office that's part of the high school, but in this case, because we're already there, is that an exception, or do we?
No, because we're there.
Right?
Brad and I would talk often, because again, we both have building, experience. We were talking, we kind of figured what would happen is they basically, if it was built new, is they'd cut us off and leave us there.
It could be separate, though.
We'd be our own little building, but again, it's, put a parking lot next to us instead or whatever, and,
The reason I'm asking is, and this is my closing remark, is because that goes right to the heart of our capital planning. This initiative, whatever it becomes, is a large, large project, and it will dominate our capital budget for years to come when it occurs. And 3 years ago, when we initiated this process, I remember speaking to the Finance Committee about the need to utilize these gap years where we have diminished capital projects and to maintain tax burden to fill it up with these, infrastructure projects that are so critical to our community. I'm still thinking that this project is a ways away, so I'm still hoping that we have the window to fund these infrastructure projects that are so critical to what we need to do down the road. But if you hear anything about the timing of this project and where it's heading, please share it with us because it does dictate the capital process. Thank you very much.
Right.
Okay, thanks, Don.
Yeah, I have a few questions. So you'd mentioned the field house, the auditorium, they're kind of outside of this. if you, like, so the feasibility study would only look at the facility, like, the parts of the facility that are basically not those, like, and so that if we wanted to do, like, any additional, work, it would kind of be outside of the, like, I guess what I'm trying to get to is, what I'm trying to sort of say here is that, the feasibility studies are going to give us a holistic plan, and then the MSBA would fund pieces of it, or would they kind of separate out and say, we're not going to touch that, if you want to do something, it's on you to figure it out.
It depends on what spaces you're talking about. So say they thought that, we needed more office space or central office. They're not even going to look at that because it's not a fundable thing by them. So they would just ignore it. They might say, again, they would look at it from the standpoint of we're going to chop that end of the building off and figure out how to get electricity to and stuff like that. But besides that, again, that's all they would be looking at. With regards to other spaces, every other space is an educational space in that building. Whether it is something that's reimbursable or not, when we did the closeout for the high school, we lost, I should remember the number now, like $6 to $8 million of reimbursement because we had done something, it could have been even less than $6 million, that we lost in reimbursement because, again, there was something that were done that were not a reimbursable piece of the project. So, which again, the building committee knew we submitted for reimbursement because, don't ask, you don't get. So, MSBA is not on this one. But, it's that sort of thing. So they will make recommendations, they will certainly design things, et cetera, but may not be reimbursed.
Okay.
Yeah, then they'll likely give us more than at least two options, maybe three. I mean, they'll give you more than one option to consider and do all the comparative data so that you can make an assessment of it.
Do they also, what about like with the leach field and the field, that would not be part of, that would not fall into this camp as well?
They consider that a utility, or they have a different term for it, so that is not part of the project.
But as an example, if we did, let's say we ended up going forward with a renovation, and we got all new technology for the high school as a result, and high-tech everything, that would then potentially allow us to shift some of our capital funds to the other buildings as we're working on this one-to-one rollout.
And then I think one thing that I noticed too is like when we talk about the 48.05%, that's only on reimbursable.
Correct.
Pieces. So like if it's a $100 million project, I'm making it up. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe only $80 million is reimbursable. So that doesn't mean it's 48% of every dollar that we put into this project.
Correct.
It's eligible.
Yeah,
Right.
eligible. Right. Okay. How much does a feasibility study cost?
Some it depends. I mean, you're probably looking on the order of $300,000 to $500,000.
Okay.
To do a comprehensive one. Again, MSB will partner with you on that. Many communities go ahead of the game because they want to get a better idea of what to expect going forward. They want to start setting aside money or plans, or truthfully, potentially have dueling feasibility studies. I mean, again, there's a lot of reasons to do all sorts of things.
Okay.
But again, that's, to me, it seems, I'm not optimistic that this would happen like this year.
Sure.
So that's not, I wouldn't entertain, no reason to do a feasibility study now for a project that's going to be started up in 6 years.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? It's too much changes, whether it be in technology, in pedagogy. I mean, there's just too much at that point.
Yeah, so while each year is a new statement of interest, the longevity is important. You do have to continue to, because if we don't put it in, it doesn't show our commitment to, that we're really committed to this, trying to get forward, even if it doesn't happen this year or next year or the year after.
And then, two other questions here. The first is, what about the Woodland Street complex in those schools? Sort of our thought process there is that we're good on those parts. Those.
Yeah, I mean, we're continuing to repair things that are broken. We have boilers coming this year. I mean, so from that perspective, you got to remember, Placentina was a brand new building. Right. 100% brand new. Miller, the new spaces are the two ends of the connectors. Okay. I guess probably about 33 to say 40% new. The middle school, there's a lot more new space there. I guess probably like 66%, I would guess, kind of on new space. And so we're in good shape. I mean, we're in good shape. But the challenge with the high school, it was a true renovation. It was the fourth of four projects, or fourth of four buildings, two projects. I don't doubt for a second the architect lost some energy. I don't doubt, it's 4 years is a long time to be in construction.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to sort of put that in perspective to make sure that, if we're going through this process and it takes years and then we're funding it for a long period of time, that we're not suddenly okay, now we got to do we want to kind of have that perspective to make sure that
Right. Those buildings are much further out. You're talking, like, again, a Placentino should be a 50-year building, for example.
It's also related to the needs of the students, right? I mean, the high school students have significantly more needs if we're trying to offer competitive programs for them as well.
Absolutely.
And enrollment could play a role in that as well. Let me just jump in with that. We have a spike in enrollment, we absorb Ashland into us or something like that, and we have to start building a new school.
That's a
Things
different
that
Health gymnasiums and
But no, you know what I'm saying? I mean, there's all sorts of enrollment things.
There's other factors.
Exactly.
And so the last point is more just a comment that I want to make, and it sort of piggybacks a little bit on what John had said about capital planning. And I think one of the things that Travis has done is putting together a capital plan, and I think it's important that when we look at this, is that looking at being able to plan our capital needs. I mean, the expectation is a project of this magnitude for a new high school would be outside of the levy. It just would have to be an set exclusion. And if that is the case, we want to be able to have as much flexibility within the omnibus budget to be able to plan. So I would hope that you would work with us to be able to build a 5-year plan on capital needs. And I'm not trying to tell you what to put in it, but just sort of to say to us, like, hey, this is kind of where we're at, this is what our needs are, and things like that. So if those particular projects are in there, that we can kind of plan ahead and we can work together, so that way, we're not sort of sacrificing everything in the town to be, because of course we want to be able to do what's best in the schools, are a critical infrastructure, but we have other things too, and we want to make sure we're able to complete those projects as well. So I would just hope that we can come up with a 5-year plan in the near future to be able to look ahead, so that as this project comes online, if it does, we're able to incorporate everything that we need. And if there's stuff that's outside of this feasibility study or this that needs to be done, fields, treatment plant, whatever, we can sort of have that and start planning for that as so that's all. So, thank you very much. I really appreciate you all coming in. It's nice to see you faces.
I know. It feels strange.
It's kind of nice. So, thank you.
Thank you. Sound a beautiful follow-up question.
Quick follow-up question. Doctor, when you were doing the presentation, you spoke about the changing nature of education from 69, 2001 to current, where it's more of a collaborative, pooled event, unconventional structure in terms of learning using technology different ways, which sounds very reasonable and very natural. Is there a sense that as Keith pointed out, that the other schools in the system are not built properly, though, because they were constructed 20 years ago, and is that educational model also in question? The reason I'm asking this is because we get in high school, how far along the road will it be before you ask for it in middle school and elementary school?
I think I'll be retired by then.
Well, all right. No, in all honesty, I'm bringing it up because if the educational model is good for the high school, is it good for the elementary and middle school?
Well, they are further along with their spaces. I mean, there are more flexible spaces in the middle school and in the elementary schools, and even just in the access for students to different parts. I mean, in all buildings, we have some concerns as far as right now, with the heat index the way it is. The second floor in all buildings get hot. So that's not going to change in our Woodland campuses right now. However, that is something we would want to address through a new high school. I mean, that certainly changes the platform there. So there are always things that we can improve upon, certainly. But I don't foresee that in the time that, let's say, we finished, if we did go forward and it took the 10 years that you indicated.
So you're here to say that the current middle school and elementary school model is sufficient for learning in the collaborative manner that you envision for the high school?
I would, again, there's probably more smaller spaces that we could create, but I do feel like they have larger spaces that kids can spread out a little bit more, and it's made it easier even during COVID. One of the reasons we were able to bring all of our K-3 students back, for example, is we took over a whole wing of the middle school and brought our Placentino students there so that they could come in every day.
Mm-hmm.
That is highly unique that we were able to adapt that.
Mm-hmm.
That just shows that space is more flexible. I can't foresee having had to do the same with the high school. Could you imagine if we brought the little ones up to the high school? It wouldn't have worked.
No. And I think, John, the older the child is, so high school students are more independent learners. Mm-hmm. And so to give them opportunities to learn in a more independent fashion than, say, a second grader or a sixth grader, or, you know what I'm saying?
I do.
So I think that's where the needs are different, and they'll continue to be different.
Well, and the other piece, just because some of the newer buildings that I've been in when I worked in Hanover and the Marshfield building that my own children didn't get to go to, but that I'm helping to pay for, just if you look at some of those spaces, the learning opportunities for high school students, because they're older and more independent, you can send them off to a workroom to work. With the little ones, the teachers have to stay and they have to be monitoring them and watching them behaviorally and academically because they need more support. So you don't tend to see those little separate spaces in an elementary setting that you do see in a high school setting. And I've seen those work very effectively. The teacher can send sometimes, a whole group of students out to the other room that's attached, and they're not worried about them not doing the work that they have to get done because they're mature enough to handle it.
Thank you, Doug.
And I would certainly send you pictures too, just from my own experience with my children, just recently moving up to the middle and high school, that the elementary schools are so different from even when I was there in terms of all their little learning centers. That they absolutely have that piece of collaboration and different learning centers that make sense for them.
Within the classroom.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Right. Little stations they can go to. But also, over the summer when the buildings are more empty, feel free to take you in for a tour.
Experience the lack of AC.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, before we go to Zoom callers for public comment, I'll just have a couple comments and one question. When is the decision for this round of SOI applications anticipated? Would it be December of 2021?
I'm assuming that, yes.
So we could be back on more than normal schedule.
Okay. That's good to know. I think we all appreciate that we're only making one decision here tonight, which is to submit the application. You made it perfectly clear that there are multiple off-ramps along the way. We are not committing the town to any sort of a decision beyond the decision to submit the application. It's clear to me, I think it's clear to everybody again, that the operational and academic benefits of a new high school are well described by the Holliston Public Schools Administration and School Committee. That's perfectly clear. From a town perspective, the Massachusetts School Building Authority really offers a significant return on investment for taxpayer dollars. There's really no other example that a community like Holliston, any community in the state, could find that where you get a return on investment like 48 cents to the dollar. So, I myself am 100% comfortable with making this type of support, offering this type of support for an opportunity like this, because again, this is a fantastic opportunity for the taxpayers of Holliston in terms of the return on investment. And finally, you had your bolded points up there as to how a new high school is really justified in Holliston. And the one that caught my eye was modernizing energy conservation. And for me, that just hits home in terms of what we're trying to do as a community in general with our sustainability efforts. So that one personally just really resonated with me. So I don't have any other questions, and I thank you for your presentation. And if you're comfortable, we'll take any public comments.
Sure.
Okay, so I'll turn to the Zoom calls. If there's anybody, Zoom callers, if there's anybody here who would like to ask a question or share comments, please indicate by raising your hand or unmuting. That? Okay, so we don't see any. So I think unless John or Ben have other comments or questions, Travis? All right, so I'll entertain a motion to...
You actually have to read the thing I sent you. I think it was tab 7 or item 7.
Well, I will happily direct the town clerk to read that.
Town clerk works across the hallway.
Town clerk, oh, I'm still working on my zingers here.
I'm sure I can get a hold of her if you like.
The select board clerk.
It's funny, while this discussion was going on, I asked Travis if he had that document, because I remember Brad had it in the binder back in the day.
Try to be a little more...
If you have it, I'll make the...
Tab 7.
Date, that's an old...
Right, Which tab was it?
It's still the same oath, right?
It's the same, they just changed the date to June 25th.
That oath.
June 25th.
There you go, the date and the year. Yeah.
June 25th, 2011.
Select Board Statement of Interest. Resolved, having convened in an open meeting on June 7th, 2021, prior to the Statement of Interest submission closing date, the Select Board of the Town of Holliston, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, have voted to authorize the Superintendent of Schools to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the Statement of Interest form dated today?
No, June 25th, 21.
Dated June 25th, 2021, for the Holliston High School, located at 370 Hollis Street, Holliston, Mass. 01746, which describes and explains the following deficiencies in the prior categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future. Same two priority areas?
Yes.
Priority area number 5, replacement, renovation, or modernization of school facility systems such as roofs, windows, boilers, heating, and ventilation systems to increase energy conservation and decrease energy-related costs in a school facility. And priority area number 7, replacement of or addition to obsolete buildings in order to provide for a full range of programs consistent with state and approved local requirements. And hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting this statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant, or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the town of Holliston to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority. Madam Chairwoman, with your permission, I will make a motion to accept and approve the Holliston School application SOI as stated.
Yes, please, thank you.
That is my motion.
We have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
So we must have a form somewhere, and we'll have Travis dig it out and sign it, correct?
No, we get, and it's an electronic that we will share with you that has.
After the meeting?
No, not till I write,
That's what you
draft
got
the
it.
application. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Wasn't gonna draft it if you weren't gonna.
Well,
Got it.
it's great to have you guys here, and we really look forward to post-pandemic
Good luck.
collaboration.
Should invite us more.
We can find these.
Open it.
There we go. Find out.
What did you say?
Thanks for the eggs.
Thank you,
I'm signing for the.
Okay.
Dr. Fresco. Good luck.
Yeah, so, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so that's the first item on our agenda. We're going to move on to item number 2, which is the Madeira Medical Retail Host Community Agreement, and I believe we have representatives of Madeira Incorporated here. I think we're about to call them into the room.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Chris. Good, how are you guys? Welcome.
Good, how are you?
We have all 3 of you at the table. You're welcome to join us if you want. So, Meredith, we're here to discuss the medical retail host community agreement.
Yeah.
So the floor is yours. Go for it.
Great. So I know Travis has probably informed you guys of the different edits that we've had in like the last hour or so. I think we are excited about having this move forward just because it's been pending for quite some time, and we really want to move forward in terms of applying to the state. So this is our first step at doing that.
Guys, add a little context, if you don't mind. Sure.
Yes, please.
Okay, so if anybody's unfamiliar, Madeira has their original HCA for cultivation from April 8th, 2019. That was amended in February 22nd, 2021 to include manufacturing. So they are operating at 44 Boynton Road. They also got their occupancy permit CO from the building inspector October 30th, 2020. They did show interest in medical retail, which for anybody on the call who's unfamiliar is separate from recreational retail. If people are familiar, the town at a previous town meeting did block the idea of recreational retail in the town. That does not apply to medical retail. This is a specific separate category here for medical retail, which is what we're discussing here. And I would just point out a couple things here, just for context. I dealt with this in other communities. Originally, medical retail was sort of seen as some community or some companies trying to get a foot in the door for recreational retail, and there was a separate process at that point. The process has changed a little bit over time as recreational retail has come to Massachusetts, and there's less interest in the medical retail. But Madeira has expressed interest as part of their mission, and I think that obviously any questions that you may have, they have anything that you have to ask them. And a presentation on what it would look like, but that's sort of the history.
Okay, thank you
Yes,
very much.
I would also just add that sadly, Travis was right that medical isn't something that people usually approach the town about in terms of, it's not as appealing to them as adult use. The town in Holliston doesn't have adult use, but it's part of our nonprofit mission. So we've always wanted to have a medical retail site, and we think having the approach of where we're cultivating the product sort of gives a farm to pharmacy feel to our patients. That's part of what the presentation is here, is that we would have living plants. We really want to focus on plants that have natural healing benefits that people don't necessarily carry such a negative connotation with. So things like aloe and lavender and a lot of other healthy remedies that people use all the time and don't necessarily associate with a negative stigma. So part of that is just an educational display and really giving them the feel that we are cultivating something there for them that is specifically designed for them to benefit medically. As Travis said, it's not adult use, so we would be subject to a site plan review, and I know that that's something that we would probably get into more details about the outdoor lighting and things like that, but we wanted to make sure we presented you tonight with sort of what the concept was that we wanted our patients to go away with, which was an educational approach to taking care of themselves with natural remedies.
Okay. Can you just speak again to your comment there about the site plan review?
Yeah. So that's part of your town's zoning bylaws that when a medical treatment facility is proposed, that it has to go through site plan review. Mm-hmm. We're not expanding the footprint of the building. We're using the existing footprint that we have to outfit just under about 500 square feet of our entire office area. So the cultivation process happens in the back warehouse.
And the site plan review will come before the planning board?
Site plan review would be under the planning board's purview, yep.
Okay, so things like parking and traffic flow, security, lighting, that will be a part of the site plan review process?
Yeah, I've had initial conversations with them. I think the parking will probably be adequate, but should that trigger anything, they may add that. And so, that would be the review would be under the building inspector and the town planner, and that process would run through the planning board. Okay.
And then in terms of specifics on security, and there's language within the HCA on police detail, and that sort of thing. Is that for tonight, or is that something?
Sure. So the HCA, we have Kate Federoff from MTC with us tonight. If there's any questions, reached out to the attorney for Maderi just to sort of highlight, the things that the town will be interested in. And there's certainly things related to security from Holliston Police and those types of things that a lot of standard language. But if there's any specific questions about the HCA, Kate was working with their attorney as early as an hour ago. So okay. I think certainly the way it looks to me is good for the town. But I don't know if there's anything, Kate, you'd like to add?
Yeah, so the way we crafted the HCA, we tried to be pretty broad in terms of indicating to the town where protections would be provided. So for example, Tina, to your point on traffic and parking, I called it out specifically in the HCA that if the planning board felt it necessary to have a traffic or parking study completed, that they would do so. And they're agreeing to that at the outset. Furthermore, I know that there is some concern, or generally, not particularly to this town, but generally there's always concern about diversion, et cetera. So there are all kinds of requirements for, number one, security, ensuring that the police department is on board, ensuring that if anything were to happen, which is unlikely because of the strong security, there would be a reporting structure, specifically as to edibles, which is another sort of topic that people who are interested in protecting minors, et cetera, we called that out specifically in the HCA. So though those kinds of regulations exist in the CCC regulations, we wanted to ensure that they were adhered to, and so we built them right into the agreement. There's processes for calling a bond if, for example, they had to shut down services and for some reason they didn't get rid of their plant product and their cannabis product. We'd have a mechanism to remove that product so it wouldn't be sort of hanging around unattended. Now, again, that's unlikely to happen because the CCC requires a bond, but I ensured that that CCC bond would also be in the name of the town, so we could call for it in the event the CCC is shorthanded. So those are some of the highlights. In addition, there's obviously the community impact payment, which still exists for medical facilities. So we're capturing the maximum allowable community impact payment of 3%.
I think the only question that we still had lingering, sorry to interrupt you, Kate, was about whether or not the board agreed that we would be giving 3%, you know, knowing that we're going to be cultivating, and we had this other host community agreement that it won't be 3% times 2, that it would be from the operation that is Madeira at 44 Boynton Road. So I think that's really one of the only pending issues. Right?
Yeah, that you're right. Thank you for reminding me of that, Meredith. So I spoke with Bill Sheehan today, and his concern was this: they may create 2 separate corporate entities to manage, one being the dispensary, the other being the product manufacturing and cultivation sides of the business. And there are various internal reasons for doing that. But the question Bill raised was the transfer, because it would be 2 separate corporate entities, although it would still be Meredith and Meredith, I'm sorry, your partner's name.
Chris,
Who would be?
Chris is also here, and Mike Tucker, who works very closely with Bill, is also on. So if we have any questions that are really tough for us to wrap our heads around, I'm sure he could help us out.
Yeah, perfect. So Meredith and Chris would still be the owners of the company, but they may establish separate corporate structures. So technically it's 2 companies. And although it would really be just a transfer of that marijuana product, whether it be the actual flower or an edible or some other kind of way to ingest the marijuana, it would be transferred by going about 10 yards down the hallway to the dispensary. That would still be a sale theoretically. So the question for the board is, would you be willing to forego the 3% on that transfer? And I said, that's really a board's decision. That's not a legal decision. That's a board's decision to make. And from their perspective, it's a double dipping kind of thing, because it's really the same entity that's producing and then ultimately selling that marijuana.
Yeah, so otherwise, I think, you know, a lot of the protections for the town has been agreed to, Madeira in the town, and, you know, I think, again, what we're talking about, for anybody sort of unfamiliar with this, specific to medical retail, right, not recreational, and that's what this would be, and I think as Kate and Meredith said, that the last real issue for this would be the idea of the gross revenue. I'm comfortable with the way that the language has been added in, and but we can discuss that further if there's any questions. But otherwise, you know, if there's questions on the medical specifically as why that's different from recreational, obviously Kate can answer those, sort of how the law works. But and obviously the rendering that was put up earlier, Madeira can also share if there's questions on that. But.
Okay. So before I take comments from either board member, any of the board members, or from the public, I just want to understand, are there boundaries to what you would be willing to entertain in terms of public comment and comment from the board? Do you want to put any sort of boundaries on what you're prepared to talk about tonight?
I mean, I guess not. I feel like we've been up here with you guys before, so fire away. I don't have anything that's, I mean, there are certain things that are confidential business decisions, and if that's the answer, then I will happily and respectfully answer you that, but please feel free to ask anything.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to create a comfortable space for everyone to ask questions and feel good.
Yeah, no problem.
So John, do you have any questions?
I do have a few. I had the benefit of meeting with Madeira last month, I think it was. So I put out there some concerns that I had, so I'll put those questions to you now publicly. For the medical retail establishment, the space, when a customer comes in, he or she will present a prescription, presumably, for the transaction. Is that correct?
A medical card. Yep. So they're issued, medical patients will get a card from the state when they go through that process.
Right. Talk a little bit about your staff's training and capability to identify an individual who may be impaired or not or who should not be receiving a dispensed medical product at that point due to the condition. That was one of the concerns you brought up.
Yes. So first of all of our staff has to go through what the state requires, such as responsible vendor training. That's one sort of safeguard against everybody thinking they're on the same page and not being on the same page. So all of our employees go through that process, which is processed through the state. The other thing that I'll say is, on top of having security there who we would report these issues to, and speaking with patients in confidentiality about, did you drive here yourself? Did somebody drive you here? Making sure we have a separate area for those conversations to take place. And then additionally, on any product that we give to a patient, the state requires you to have warning labels. Part of them are mandatory, and then part of them we select which of the sort of warnings that you want to put on there. And I have some of them written out now. So you have to have on there, please consume responsibly. And then there's 2 additional warnings, and we have made the decision that we'll make one of ours: marijuana can impair concentration, coordination, and judgment. Do not operate a vehicle or machinery under the influence of this drug. So you can also choose that women who are pregnant and breastfeeding shouldn't be using marijuana. So there's sort of a variety of the things that you can emphasize to your patients, and we feel that by making that one of the stances we have on all of the packages that go out, it will set a policy in a tone that they'll be able to understand this is a area where you're coming to get help, and we're here for that purpose. We're definitely not here to put other people in harm's way by creating any kind of situation where people are driving under the influence of any sort.
Thank you. When you envision the medical marijuana space and customer activities, has Mediri estimated broadly what kind of volume of traffic one can envision on a daily basis? Have you done any kind of customer projections?
Yeah, so we're hoping to get between 24 and 35 patients a day, but we are internally having conversations about maybe making the first month or so only by appointment, so that we can make sure each patient is getting the kind of service and customer attention that we want them to have, and that we also understand our operation to make sure we know the needs and the flow of exactly how to serve them best within a more controlled environment, if you will, by having appointments instead of opening it up to walk-ins on day one. So that's something that we want to be pretty intentional about.
The last question is kind of a curiosity question. The medical card that they present, must it be a Massachusetts medical card? So a New Hampshire or Rhode Island resident does not?
Out of state, no.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
No problem. I think that in some instances you could apply for your doctor to have one that would give you sort of like a permission slip that your medical card could apply from out of state, but no, it's not something that you're serving out of state customers for the specific reason of not wanting people to be driving back to their home state.
And by the way, not a question but a comment, we did observe the rendering that they had previously put up, Tina, and you could see the security levels that Mediri has programmed into the space to effectively.
Yeah, so there's man traps. So if somebody's coming in, they're not coming right into the storefront. They're coming into this front entry vestibule, and then they're coming into the sort of educational exhibit area. When they enter this door, that door closes behind them. So that's what we mean by man trap. It's just a security feature to make sure that you're not able to gain access to areas without having specific controls gates and barriers there. And then there's another one when people exit, so they're going to have gone through the checkout counter, and there shouldn't be any confusion in terms of when you're coming in and the door closes and when you're leaving and the door closes. Oh, yeah, so the pneumatic tubes are, all of the products will still be stored in the back of the warehouse, so it won't necessarily be up front where our office is and where these transactions are taking place. So if you imagine at the bank, when they send down the tubes through their little system, it's a very similar mechanism to that. So we will just be placing the orders, and then there's somebody in back who's packaging them, putting them into the bank tubes, and putting them out there. So really the person who's serving patients isn't worried about grabbing what they wanted, but they're giving them the most dedicated experience to ask them how we can tailor this medication to their needs and answer any questions they have. And then somebody in the back is responsible for making sure all of the items end up in their bag before they head out.
I am.
Yes, I have a couple questions. First, and forgive me if some of these might be a little rudimentary. I'm newer to the process than my colleagues.
No problem.
Will there be any consumption on site?
No, and that's part of it's written into our host community agreement, especially not even for employees if that was allowed at the state level. So no. You had mentioned appointments at least initially. What are your intended hours of operation? So I think that's also included in this host community agreement.
Okay.
So there's a question of whether that was going to be on the planning board or the select board, so it's just put into the HCA.
Okay. 13th.
And that's important for you all to think about too. I should have highlighted that. So I put in Monday through Saturday, 10 to 8, Sunday, 12 to 8. Sort of, so I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Just as a general comment, I know there are a lot of dispensaries that are open a lot later, and I don't think that it's had any negative impact towards the town, except for that they're generating more revenue, which ends up benefiting the town. So I think coming to an agreement on the hours of operation should be something that we use to sort of craft this to make sure we're meeting the needs of the community and the patients within the community. But we have no plans of going until the wee hours, so I think if that's the concern, it's definitely not something that is a late night business.
Sure. No, I understand. We're not a late night kind of community.
I've noticed, yeah.
I think
They're the
only
early
other thing
bird
that's-
special.
Yes. Up at 6. So I think the only other question I have might be actually more for Kate than for you folks. Could we just sort of talk a little bit more about the difference between the medical retail and regular retail? Because our town bylaws have specifically talked about regular retail and medical. Yeah, and medical can't, could we just talk a little bit about, how medical is different? And, does the town have any opportunity or obligation to discuss it? Is it something that should be discussed?
Yeah.
Or is it
So-
something that's kind of outside of that?
Yeah, so, just remember, medical came into Massachusetts much earlier than recreational marijuana. It came into Massachusetts. It was approved much earlier. And at the outset, there were some towns that tried to prohibit all types of medical marijuana, whether it were grow or all the way to dispensing. And I like to use the word dispensing rather than retail because people get confused and they think it's adult use retail, but medical dispensing is a completely different animal. The customers or patients really come into the dispensary to get a prescription drug. And because it is something that the medical industry is promoting more as an effective measure to combat pain and other kinds of ailments that may even be a healthier alternative, the state said, we welcome medical marijuana. And the Attorney General, as a matter of sheer fact, said that those communities that attempted at the initial stages of medical marijuana to prohibit medical marijuana within its borders ruled those zoning bylaws, out of order. You can't allow those zoning bylaws because it unduly restricts a right to essentially medical access. And recreational or adult use marijuana was treated much differently because that is not for, it's for recreation, just like liquor would be for recreation. It's not to treat an ailment. Its purpose is much different. So built right into that statute, which legalized recreational marijuana, was an option to allow communities to prohibit, and they could prohibit portions like the town of Holliston did, which only prohibited retail, or it could prohibit completely. So it's just a different animal. You have a different population of customers or patients because they're there to treat an ailment as prescribed by a doctor. So it's just a different animal. But the reality is you cannot prohibit medical marijuana in your community. The interesting and I guess nice part about Madiri coming in is you've already established a relationship with them on the passive use side, so the cultivation and the product manufacturer side, such that you feel comfortable that they're going to be a responsible partner with you as this kind of new use rolls out. So that's really the long and the short of it. I don't know if there are any particular or pointed questions that anyone wanted to ask.
No, that was kind of what I was looking for. I don't know what, that's kind of what I wanted to hear, so thank you, Kate,
Okay.
appreciate it.
Yes.
And I think that's all I have.
Okay. So I have a couple questions, and I agree with Kate about the partnership piece, and I appreciate what's in the HCA in terms of the issues that the board has brought forward through the negotiation. So I mean, I think it's a great demonstration of the level of partnership. This is just a general question, not specific to this HCA. Are tamper-proof containers for edibles, for product rather, are they something that Missouri will use?
It's required by the state, yeah.
They're all tamper-proof?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, all right. And then in terms of potency, can you just speak to that a little bit, the type of potencies in the products that will be sold through the dispensary?
Yeah, so state regulatory measures are in place for us to have everything that leaves our building and goes to a patient or to our wholesale account has to be tested through the state laboratory. So all of those potency results and test results are things that are available for the patients to read, and also in terms of dosing guidance with edibles, if, that's sort of, I think, where people end up going with potency is how many gummies are you eating or whatever. So those instructions are very explicit, and I think that one of the benefits of having just medical at our site is that we can really give hands-on guidance to go slow and steady and wait a half an hour and sort of tell people exactly what the experience should feel like and when they should take more if they want to take more. So those are things that, one, are explicitly written on the packaging, but even if, as people do, they rush to do something, we're going to make sure we have the space and the time and the staff to be able to explain exactly what the benefits, as Kate said, medically speaking, are for using these products.
Okay, but what I guess my question was, are there limits to how potent your products can be? Are you limited to is it milligrams of
per package?
Yeah.
So that it has to be written on there. There's no requirement that you could put. I think it's more of a business decision in terms of, do you want to sell, one chocolate bar or a chocolate bar that's been broken down into 3 pieces and you scatter that potency out over those sort of denominations. But there's no, it affects everybody differently, which is why we sort of view this as personalized medication. So it's a delicate balance of that person using that edible or that product in a way that most benefits them in the right way.
Okay. I'm pleased to see the language about the edibles in the HCA. I think it's important that the community knows that you're committed to primary prevention, keeping candy flavored. The language is in here. It's pretty specific.
And I think that's taken almost directly from the state language too.
Right.
They have extremely explicit restrictions on what they want people to produce for the obvious reasons of not wanting it to seem enticing to someone who it's not meant to entice.
Okay, and I appreciate that.
Shapes, not flavors. They want to taste good, but
Right.
they can't look like, pears
Yeah.
and people and.
Okay. And then in terms of the hours of operation, I'm also pleased to see that, they sort of mimic what you'd see with any other type of pharmacy, medical dispensary.
Yeah.
So I think they're reasonable as they're written in here. So I don't have any other questions. That's it. So if you're comfortable, we're going to turn to the people on the
Sure.
Zoom call for public comment, unless John or Ben had any follow-up questions. Travis, do you want to add anything? So we have residents in the room, so we'll take public comment from the room first, and then we'll go to the Zoom call. So go ahead.
Hi, Stacy Raffi, 20 Arthur Street. In full disclosure, I'm also chair of the school committee, so I do have a little bit of a education lens that I'm wearing at the moment. I want to ask the board, I just want to make sure that all stakeholders have been considered in the HCA, meaning youth and family services, schools, Holliston Police, Holliston Drug and Alcohol Awareness Coalition. And I say that because this community has spent a lot of time and resources, getting resources such as grants for prevention and intervention, and that is very important to us. And I know we're talking about medical marijuana, but like other prescription drugs, they can cause problems in the community, and for some that is a concern. So I want to make sure that those stakeholders and their concerns are taken care of in the ACA.
So I can speak for myself. John and Ben may have comments to add, but I can speak for myself in conversations with Travis and Kate that, yes, Youth and Family Services Director has been contacted. I'm participating in the drug-free community grant program, which means HDAC is involved, and they've been looped into the conversation. The chief of police has been looped into the conversation. So I feel that the results of those conversations are represented here in this HCA. And I want to thank Travis and Kate for their hard work to bring those forward and present them to Mediri for consideration, and they've accepted.
And just as a bit of background, we were at a meeting when the Drug Free Communities program made, I believe, they were asking the board if they could use the host community agreement money to apply for a federal grant in order to hire, maybe it was to ask money to hire the person who was going to be writing the federal grant. My background is also in education, so my undergrad degree I got from Salem State is in education, and then I went on to get my master's at the University of Colorado. I offered and am still willing to help in any way I can because I think that those programs are appropriate use of these funds, whereas in a lot of towns there's not appropriate uses of these funds. And so I've not only sort of supported that just in sending emails out after that first meeting, but volunteered to help contribute. I wrote federal grants in a previous life, and I also, would be happy to help with curriculum or any kind of programs that I personally can contribute to outside of what the town chooses to do with the 3% revenue that we share with them. So. And I appreciate you coming here tonight and asking those questions too. Thank you.
I trust the board.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah.
I know that, we have a great relationship with them and I trust them, but I needed to ask a question for others.
Yeah, so Ben, John, Ben, do you guys have any comments or any conversations or discussions you want to reference? All right, so anyone else here in the room? All right, so I'm going to turn to the Zoom call. Anyone on the Zoom call who'd like to provide public comment with a question or comment?
Hello.
So I'm just going to have you introduce your name and your address, please.
Sure. This is Blake Mensing, 1865 Washington Street. Just for full transparency, I used to represent Mediri, but I'm just appearing here as a citizen. I have full confidence that there'll be great participants in the town as they already have been. So just want to say I'd be happy to see them open up selfishly because it would be about a 4-minute drive from my house. So yeah, just want to say that they're good folks, and I think they'll do well by our town.
Thank you, Blake. Anyone else on the Zoom call who'd like to make public comment? Okay, so seeing none, we'll wait for our town administrator. I'm sorry, we got one more. Michael Tucker.
I'm sorry, Michael Tucker. I represent Mediri now, and I just wanted to reiterate what Kate had said regarding the 3% CI between entities at Mediri. I wanted to be sure that the board didn't have any questions about what the concern there was. It's an effort simply to fairly represent the transaction that takes place between two businesses that are owned by the same operational individuals, and it's an effort to prevent them having to pay twice on a single transaction.
Thank you. So, John or Ben, do you have any questions or comments on that?
No, but to clarify, as Michael and Kate, it's 3% across the board. That's what it is. It's not double dipping.
That's correct. It's 3% across the board. In the event that there were two entities that are owned by the same people, one down the hall from the other, the 3% that would be charged on the retail sale and not on the transfer from one entity to the other.
I have a quick question. You all have not been paying the 3% to date, correct?
No, so the way our first host community,
manufacturing
our cultivation host community agreement that was dated back in April of 2019 states that it will be after 14 months from the date of our first wholesale transaction. Right. So we were just awarded our final license from the state in February. We still have another designation from the state, which is commence operations, and that's when we can transfer product. And at that point, it would be 14 months from the date that we transfer that product for sale. Because
the HCA has a clock, right? Was it 3 years, Kate?
I think you mean the cultivation HCA? That one?
Yes.
I think it's a 5-year term, but the way we structured it is, if I remember correctly, that it was after the 5th years of payment. So that piece would stay in effect until the 5th year's payment. And I don't remember if we broke it up quarterly or not, but that would continue on. And if it does expire, we renegotiate the terms of the HCA because they need an HCA to operate, right? So we would want to allow them to continue on in their operations regardless of the expiration. But regardless, the payments continue for 5 full years.
And as a result of this agreement, the payments will be coterminous, correct?
Well, we'll continue. So remember, the cultivation operation has 2 types of sales. It's a wholesale sale, so they could sell to, Cape Federoff marijuana over in some other town, anywhere town, and that would be a wholesale sale. And that would be captured in the initial 5-year term of the cultivation agreement. This agreement will have a 5-year term starting from when they start operations here on the dispensary side, and would be to sales to any customer or patient, more stated more correctly, patient.
But because the former hasn't happened yet, they'll be in line now to be coterminous. That's my point.
Yes, because they actually needed to build out and grow the plants. Yes.
Correct. Okay, we're good. I'm all set.
Okay,
Thanks, Kate.
You're welcome.
okay. Thanks, Kate. So you are looking for,
So if everybody's comfortable with the gross language, that was the only thing that Kate wanted to make sure you were comfortable with. Then everything else, again, has been reviewed by both councils, and we would look for a motion, which I provided to the clerk, which would be that first one.
You want to get consensus on the
I
gross
was just going
language?
to say, so I think we have consensus. Now the time to speak up. If not, that as written, the 3% is okay in the HCA language.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Likewise, John?
I'm fine. Shall I
Okay.
make a motion?
Yes.
All right, I'd like to make a motion to move to authorize and execute a revision to the existing host community agreement with Maderi located at 44 Point Road to include dispensing of only medical marijuana as a licensed medical marijuana treatment center.
A motion, do you have a second?
I will second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Good to see you.
Meredith.
Hi, thank you.
I will follow up with you guys tomorrow.
Thank you all very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Have a good night. Good night, you too.
Mary, set your water bottle.
Oh, yes.
These are the things I always left.
Oh, no, last time I left my phone here after we met, so.
Remember
Glad it
that?
wasn't that. Yeah, thank you. It always
I
happens.
made a couple decisions for you.
Thank you.
Oh, good.
Okay, thank you. All right, so that's the second item on our agenda. The third is a revision to the host community agreement for 91 Tunnel Home Drive, which is a transfer. So, Tarek, are you going to take that one?
Yes, we actually have the individuals here to give a quick presentation. They provided something ahead of time. If we can just clear that so we can see the screen. I think if you just give us 1 second, so we're going to be talking to WLMA LLC, and they can introduce themselves, and we are all set. Go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to present. My name is Meg Nash. I'm an attorney at Vicente Cedarburg, and I'm joined here by my client, Jim Lamoureux, who is of WLMA LLC. And I also want to express my gratitude for the scheduling this evening, since we've already sort of been steeped in cannabis business establishments. So we're all sort of primed for the presentation, I hope. So in brief, if I could have the next slide, please, or can I control that?
No, just say next slide and we'll move that for you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. WLMA is requesting an assignment of the host community agreement that the town previously entered into with Mass Botanicals to operate a recreational marijuana cultivation and product manufacturer establishment at 91 Cunnaholm Drive. So if this request is approved, WLMA intends to purchase the site from the existing owner and renovate and operate a state-of-the-art cultivation and product manufacturing facility within the existing industrial building. And what I'd really like to stress this evening for purposes of the board is that WLMA is ready, willing, and able to promptly seek state licensure as well as all necessary local approvals so that it can begin to perform pursuant to the terms of the host community agreement, specifically by hiring local vendors to assist in the build out, providing increased employment opportunities for Holliston residents, and also efficiently establishing legally compliant cultivation and manufacturing operations with an emphasis on high quality products, security, and safety for its employees as well as the community. Could you turn to the next slide, please? So WLMA's confidence in its ability to execute is based in large part on the depth of experience and proven track record of its founder and CEO, Jill Lamoureux, who's here with us tonight. Jill is a nationally recognized cannabis expert with high-level experience in several prominent cannabis industry organizations. For example, Jill was a founding member and served as the first female chair of the National Cannabis Industry Association, which is the only national trade association dedicated to advancing the interests of a responsible cannabis industry through advocacy and education, and provides commentary and insight as to, the type of regulations that are really going to support a responsible industry. She's also been a patient-focused program director for Americans for Safe Access, an organization dedicated to ensuring safe and legal access to cannabis for therapeutic use as well as research, so that the industry is really able to dial in some of those specifications and ability to use the plant to treat ailments. Her participation in these mission-based organizations is due to the fact that she's been involved in the cannabis industry dating back to 2008, when she and her husband began one of Colorado's most respected multi-location dispensaries. And she's also been involved in Massachusetts cannabis industry since its inception, having worked extensively as a consultant to numerous Commonwealth-based businesses in developing standard operating procedures necessary for both obtaining a license as well as maintaining regulatory compliance throughout its operations. Next slide, please. WLMA is also confident that it'll be able to expediently move through the state and local licensing process based on the nature and location of the proposed facility at 91 Kunaholm Drive. The board already approved this location pursuant to the current HCA, and the location complies with all applicable buffer requirements. It's located in the industrial zone of Holliston, which expressly allows for marijuana establishments upon receipt of a special permit and site plan approval. Next slide, please. In terms of the scope of operations, WLMA plans to cultivate and produce marijuana and marijuana products for wholesale to other licensed adult use marijuana businesses. All products will be tested by independent laboratories prior to sales to disclose the cannabinoid profiles as well as other features of the products that can be included clearly on any labels so that consumers know what they're purchasing. All operations will be undertaken in strict compliance with Massachusetts regulations, as well as the guidance issued by Cannabis Control Commission regarding best practices as that relates to environmental media, energy efficiency, and equipment standards. There won't be any retail sales on site, and all on-site consumption will be strictly prohibited throughout the premises. Next slide, please. Similarly, WLMA will comply with the state's stringent security requirements and will seek to collaborate with relevant municipal departments, including the police and fire department, to ensure that the facility is a safe and secure environment for employees and its abutters in the Holliston community. Specifically, the security systems will include perimeter alarms on all exit and entry points, duress, panic, and holdup alarms connected to local law enforcement, a failure notification system that will alert WLMA's executive management team of any system failures, as well as comprehensive high definition video surveillance throughout the interior and exterior of the premises. Next slide, please. So this slide came through a little bit funky, I believe, but I can kind of walk us through it here. Our goal is to provide a proposed timeline in order to provide a much more tangible outline of our plan of action in the coming months. Specifically, assuming the board approves the assignment of the HCA by July of this year, we'll move quickly to submit state licensing applications as well as local licensing applications. And barring any unforeseen circumstances, we expect to be in receipt of a special permit and site plan approval within 90 days after the assignment of the HCA. And we'll look to move quickly on those applications. By November of 2021, we plan to submit a request to the commission for architectural review, assuming we can get on a November agenda for provisional license. And that architectural review will be a prerequisite to beginning renovations at the property. And we expect to have approval before the end of the year so that we can begin renovations in early 2022 with the goal of obtaining a certificate of occupancy and receiving final license from the commission of June of 2022. Based on this, we expect to commence operations by August of 2022. And while this is kind of an aggressive timeline going forward, it's based on our experience with Cannabis Control Commission and other applicants who have moved through the licensing process, as well as the expertise of Ms. Lamoureux and her team in implementing operations in Massachusetts and other jurisdictions. Do you mind moving to slide 9, please? Oh, there we go. There's a timeline and a little bit more of a visual orientation. Before closing and kind of opening it up to questions to hear from the board, I just want to emphasize WLMA's commitment to making a positive community impact throughout all aspects of its operations, particularly with respect to creating employment opportunities for residents and local vendors, payments of its community impact fee, which is at 3%, as we were just discussing with respect to the other applicant, as well as collaboration with various municipal departments to ensure that the company is widely regarded as a good neighbor in the Holliston community. So with that, I would love to open it up for questions for either me or Ms. Lamoureux with respect to our request this evening for the assignment of the HCA.
Thank you for the presentation, Meg. So I'll open up to the board first. John?
Good evening, Meg. Jill, quick question. Forgive me for not knowing this, but can you tell me what happened to Mass Botanicals? Did they ever build out the space adequately? Did they get to growing? What is the status of their HCA? And how does that feed into the HCA that you are offering tonight? You just take over those terms? Do we reset the clock? Can you fill in some gaps there for me, please?
As far as I'm not sure about restarting the clock or how that works, and I'll let the attorneys deal with that, but they never did get operational or raise money or really do anything with the site. So it is completely needs full renovation, but it's a nice big open building and it's a blank slate. So that at least is good. There's not a ton of demo work that needs to be done. So
I guess let me pivot to our council. Kate, do you happen to know, are they taking over an existing HCA that the town had with Mass Botanicals, or are we starting a new one and thus a new clock?
Travis, this is the one we just did the assignment for. It was like a one-pager, right?
We have this as yes.
Yeah, so it's like so it's a one-page assignment, and they assume all the terms of the existing HCA. And what was the original company again, Meg?
It was
Mass Botanicals.
Mass Botanicals. So
yes, I can pull that. So Mass Botanicals agreement went into place, 91 Cunningham. The HCA date was September 7, 2018. Normal 3% gross sales, wholesale sales. No CO was ever issued from the building inspector for the property.
yeah, and I'm trying to pull up. Usually, if it predated me, I don't know, but usually I put in a provision in there that the payment provisions survive even the term of the agreement, such that it has a 5-year. You get 5 full years of payment. And I'm trying to pull up Mass Botanicals right now.
While she's looking at that, if any help, that's the only question I have then, so.
Okay. Actually, I just kind of wanted, that's really all I wanted to understand. Okay, so that was the mechanics of it.
So in the past, since I've been on the board, when a cannabis cultivator grower has come before the board, they've given a presentation on how their operations would work. Sounds like what you're saying, Meg and Jill, is that Mass Botanicals never got even close to that. But they didn't really do any work inside the building. So when you talk about renovation,
Yes, it will be pretty much a brand new build. It's a renovation because the main structure will stay. It's a steel building. It's right now uninsulated metal panels. The roof definitely needs replacement. So we're probably just gonna scrape the roof and the sides and put in insulated panels, new roofing. So it's pretty much not quite a tear down, but it's very close to that, so.
Okay. People, John and Ben, I mean, we've had presentations where they talked about, again, how they operate. The thing that's coming to mind for me is water usage. And they talk, in past previous presentations have been pretty extensive on water conservation and how they grow with that in mind. So I'm feeling a little bit without a presentation for
Operations.
Yeah, for operations. So when we make this, you're asking for a transfer of an HCA, but we have really nothing by which to compare how the facility would be operated. So I just put that out there for the board to consider. I have two other real specific questions. Where else does WLMA operate? Where else do you have cultivation in the state of Massachusetts?
Sure. Nowhere within the state of Massachusetts, and WLMA will be a new company for purposes of operating within the state. However, our company has operations in Colorado, Ohio, Oregon, and we are building new operations at the same time in Michigan that we are in Massachusetts. So each state has its own company, but then we all roll up to a larger parent company.
Okay.
And Ben and John, if it answers your question under 2, term and termination of Mass Botanicals, which they would assume all of those responsibilities, it specifically provides this agreement shall terminate at the end of the term, provided, however, the provisions for the final payment resulting from the impacts in year 5, due and payable in year 6, shall survive the termination date. So all of those 5 years of payment will be received by the town through the new corporation of Women's WTM. I'm so sorry, Jill.
That's all right. It's a WL. So WL stands for white label because we are mainly a contract manufacturer. And then MA is obviously Massachusetts. So you'll see WLCO is Colorado, WLOH is Ohio, WLOR is Oregon. And we do that for, insurance purposes, of course. And I'm happy to address a little bit about how we operate, and happy to come back with a full presentation if that's what's required. We are a mostly women majority owned company. We are a living soil grower, meaning we're all organic, and we grow, well, that's mandated in Massachusetts, but we grow in soil. So when you talk about water conservation, we don't do any water through. We only water the plants to the exact moisture they need. So as far as watering goes, we're very sustainable. And we actually, for this project, have engaged a company called Stock, S-T-O-K. They are a consulting architectural firm out of Denver. In particular for this project, we're looking to get a sustainability certification on the build in Massachusetts. I don't think we might be able to qualify for a LEED certification, but we are looking to do something similar. So that's actually going to be really fun on this project. So as Meg said, I do have a vast experience in the industry in cannabis and consulting throughout the country, but WL is now my company. So for the past 2-3 years, I've been operating this just based on the past experience I've had. So it's really exciting to be able to kind of go into a state and run these organizations the way I'd like, benefiting from all those years of consulting. So, and it's kind of, the cultivation is a more temporary measure in this facility. It is approximately a 45,000 square foot facility, which is plenty large, but not large enough to sustain our long-term goals for cultivation that will move, 3-4 years from now somewhere else. And the intent for this facility is it will become 100% just devoted to manufacturing. as that business expands. So while we do talk about cultivation, we don't intend for that building to be primarily a cultivation site for very long.
Okay. Well, let me just get some consensus from the board. Are either of you comfortable, both of you comfortable moving forward to consider the transfer without a formal presentation, or would you both, either of you prefer to have a formal presentation on both operations and goals for the business here in Holliston?
I have no objection to a follow-up presentation. It's a standard that we've used for other operations. Jill's offered to have it, so that's okay with her if she wants to come back. Jill, I mean, essentially what we're looking for are impacts on our infrastructure, electricity usage, water, sewer to that extent, or removal, that sort of thing. It's something we've seen from the other growers that's come into Holliston. So if you have the wherewithal to pull that together, I think it would all be better suited to understand the operation more comfortably. Based on your background, your history, I don't think it'd be a heavy lift for you to pull that together.
Yeah.
Not at all. We are currently working with our design team now, and I don't know that we have, we're just working on the initial concepts, so we don't have the engineers engaged, but I can come really, really close on some of those numbers. Obviously, when we submit our building plans, we'll get a little bit more specific with those electric draws and that type of thing, but I can get you very, very educated guesses. If that's
So, Tina, I'll make a motion for action on the request to transfer the host community agreement license from Master Botanicals to WLMA LLC until we receive an operational presentation.
Okay, so we have a motion to defer. Do we have a second?
I'll second it. Do we need to do a motion? Or do we just...
Yes, we've got a motion.
Well, what it does is it's giving them a vote of where we stand on things.
All right, that's fair.
Nothing wrong with that. So.
Okay. So motion to defer and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Jill, thank you for your flexibility with us, for your willingness to come back with a presentation. Greatly appreciate it. And thank you both for taking the time to come tonight to introduce your business to Holliston. And we look forward to the presentation.
great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, we did not take public comment, but given that we have a motion to defer, I think we'll just move on.
Can I have a public comment on the operation?
There we go. All right, so we're going to move on to the legislative update on cannabis delivery from town council. We've got Kate again on the call. Thanks, Kate. The floor is yours.
Okay, so now I've got to switch back. So we're going to delivery. Did I hear you correctly? We're on delivery?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so delivery is the new area, the new use approved by the CCC. So there are two types of delivery now allowed in the state. One is courier, and that's been allowed for some time now. And the other is operator, marijuana delivery operator, which is a new type of delivery allowed, and it was recently allowed, I want to say the end of May. And the difference between the two types of delivery are the courier service is more like just a pickup service. They'll go to the retailer, pick up the marijuana product, and deliver to someone's home. And they don't actually take ownership of the marijuana. Now, the new type of use, marijuana delivery operator, allows an operator to go to a cultivator, go to a manufacturer, even go to a retailer and take that marijuana, and they can't manufacture it. They can't change it from, say, flour to an edible or an oil or something along those lines, but they can take it and repackage it, and then they sell it as their own. So that facility is a lot different than just a courier service, which takes possession of the marijuana only for a short period during travel in transit, right? And the exchange is really between the marijuana retailer and the customer. Here, the exchange is actually between the delivery operator and the customer. So two very different types of facilities. The operator can store the marijuana, and again, they can relabel the marijuana and make it their own. So they need a bigger facility, not a huge facility, but a bigger facility so that they can do the storage and the relabeling. Now, the question becomes for the town of Holliston is, do you want to allow delivery of marijuana? Because here's the landscape. Right now, Holliston has prohibited marijuana retail. So delivery is not allowed per the CCC regs to any community where retail is prohibited. So if I am a resident of Holliston, I can't receive a delivery in my home because the town opted to prohibit retail. Now that can be a perfectly viable option, and I contend that your bylaws as currently written prevent delivery in the town of Holliston. Now, the difference is it doesn't specifically call out marijuana delivery operator or marijuana courier service as being prohibited uses, but why is it prohibited? Because we've prohibited retail, and the way you defined retail in your bylaws was pretty extensive, so it would have, assumed delivery as well. And you have a provision in your bylaws that say anything not expressly allowed is prohibited, right? So there are all kinds of legal reasons that we say marijuana delivery is prohibited. A more conservative approach would be to go through that process and you do a town meeting vote and a ballot question again, and the residents will say, not another ballot question, but that would be the way to prohibit a type of use in the town of Holliston, because we're beyond the date where you could just do it by a town meeting. So again, it would be a bylaw to prohibit in a ballot question to prohibit delivery. And then it would be like crystal clear, no questions asked, no hot shot attorney could come in and say, but there's this little provision which gives me a toehold to say delivery is allowed. So that's option number one. Option number two is, do we want to explore whether or not the residents want to allow delivery? And some of the reasons for that could be, okay, well, we didn't want necessarily a brick and mortar store because of a whole host of reasons. They were concerned of traffic. They were concerned of, customers. I don't know what personal opinions the residents of the town of Holliston had, but there were all those concerns that were floating around, which prompted the residents to vote to prohibit. I think it was 3 times. I think we were up to 3 times in the town of Holliston. So delivery may, for those folks, still have the same underlying reasons for prohibiting retail may apply to them personally for delivery as well. Or they may not. They may say, geez, delivery is a little bit more discreet, and there are these unmarked vans, which you may or may not know, or actually, I'm pretty confident you would not know, are marijuana delivery trucks. And it allows residents to get a product that is legal in Massachusetts. If delivery were allowed, you would get a couple of things. You would get the community impact payments of 3% max cap and sales tax, because again, this is a retail transaction. So unlike medical, where you have medical marijuana, which isn't subject to tax, it's subject to a 3% local sales tax. So if the town were to consider delivery as a viable option, a viable use for the community, I would suggest to you that you should probably adopt that local sales tax provision under 64N. I think it's 64N section 3. So, and it's different for every community, and I'm just not sure what the appetite of the town, either the select board or the residents, have for delivery. So are there thoughts or questions?
The idea of sorry, the idea of bringing this forward now is kind of giving us some runway. If there's anything the board wants to hear back from, if there's any, steps forward, we can certainly, engage the planning board, those types of things, with the idea that potentially there might be something we want on the October town warrant. Let's get ahead of it now. And this is kind of a primer since we had Kate with us this evening.
Then we should also point out that to change from Article 10 at May town meeting, we use them now more often see potential bylaw changes in October. This is kind of new, I think, for Holliston to consider. Okay, so, John, your comment?
So I prefer to see it on a warrant article this fall. This is a relatively new space. I think we're starting to hear about it. I never want to see Holliston be on the cutting edge of this kind of thing. I'd like to get the benefit of some time to evaluate what other communities are thinking, what they might be doing, bring all that before the voters, as we have with other marijuana level options, including retail sales. So that would be my choice.
For October 20th?
Yes, ma'am.
So the runway being between now and town meeting, et cetera.
No, I think that's reasonable. I think that works for me. I think people we're pretty clear in the past of how they feel about some of these, of what's going on, but I'd like to hear from residents if maybe there is a little bit of a different appetite. I'm not sure there is. I think my only question, I'm not sure to direct it to, I'm just trying to understand in terms of delivery. Are we just talking about delivery to residents in this conversation? We're not talking about delivery from anyone to other residents in other communities, or is that beyond the scope of this?
It's delivery, I can answer that. So it's delivery from a marijuana either courier or operator licensed by the CCC to a Holliston resident. So that's number one. Number two, it's the citing of a marijuana operator's facility. So meaning, would you allow a brick and mortar facility where a delivery operator or courier service would be housed? Again, it's one of those passive uses similar to manufacture and cultivation, in that customers cannot go to that facility and purchase the marijuana. They only receive the marijuana at their residence.
So, if I'm understanding correctly, if a grower wanted to pursue being a marijuana delivery operator, they would have to renegotiate their HCA?
They would, because we were really careful in our HCA to say you're limited in operations to this type of license, and a cultivator would be limited to a cultivator's license, and they don't have within that particular license the option to deliver. Now, it's not to say that a cultivator couldn't try to get a second license, which would be a delivery operator, or if they were a cultivator manufacturer, then it would be their third license, and that would be their cap. They're only allowed 3 licenses. So they could try to seek another license from the CCC, but regardless, they would have to amend our HCA to permit that type of operation in the town of Holliston. So it would be a twofold process. It would be HCA through the Board of Selectmen, and if presuming for the purposes of argument that the town meeting was receptive to the idea, twofold process, HCA, second fold approval through the planning board.
Okay, so that would be part of this proposed warrant article, would be language about that?
Yeah, that would be, so the proposed warrant article could be, and we could do it a couple of ways. We could do one to allow a delivery operator license via a special permit, or we could have site plan review, or we could do something else. I don't know exactly, or we could have competing town meeting articles to have that type of approval process, allowing marijuana delivery operators and couriers, and a second article to expressly prohibit, so define them in the bylaw and prohibit them, but that would trigger a ballot vote.
So maybe the effort of doing it in October is then we could sort of get the appetite, and if we could vote it down, then we could pursue it if we wanted to change the bylaws, the bylaws. that time in May to allow for it with town meeting sort of discussing that. Okay.
But most of all, give us all the chance to learn more about this option, which
Sure.
sounds like it's got a lot of loopholes.
Yeah.
Or not
It
loopholes,
sounds like
but
it's pretty
options.
new and sounds
Yeah.
like it's still
Yep.
untested, to your point.
Yep.
Okay.
We have I think we put their hand up, Tina.
Yeah, actually, I just have a question before we take public comment here. So from what I hear you saying, it sounds like then this could become an incentive to our existing 7 cultivators and manufacturers here in Holliston to pursue other options for their business.
Yeah, I mean,
Pathway
yeah, so certainly they could, but remember, one caveat to the delivery operator and cultivator licenses is that they have to be social equity. So I'm not sure, either social equity or economic empowerment. I'm not sure which of those folks that we've contracted with are social equity or economic empowerment. Sometimes I think they may partner up with folks who do qualify. I'm not really sure about that internal kind of partnership that goes on, but I'm pretty sure that exists. So, but it could allow them to alter their structure to go after, provided they're not capped out at their 3 licenses. But it could, yes, it could improve upon existing operations, or it could generate new business to the town.
Okay. And you think that by October there'll be a bit of a history in other communities as to how this is playing out?
There may be.
Fast
So
enough?
yeah, so these folks that have applied for operator licenses and in Courier, I should say, they have this pre-screening process at the CCC. So it kind of gives them a sense of, what I think the idea is to give them a sense of what they may be missing so that they can go through that process more quickly, because the whole idea, let's talk about the foundations of adult use marijuana, was to empower these groups of people that were improperly, in the voters' eyes, mistreated because of marijuana convictions, right? So they want to try to push those groups through the CCC process after vetting them fully, of course, but ensure their success rather than have kind of all the benefits of marijuana being centralized in the wealthy and the big companies. So that's the idea there. So I'm thinking they're pushing them through. I believe there may be one operator license that's been issued at this point. I'm not 100% sure on that piece. No, I'm wrong. Blake's shaking his head. He said I'm wrong. No one's got it yet.
If I can talk.
Okay.
Oh, wait.
Yeah, so John and
I'm
Beth
good.
are all set. We'll turn to public comment. And Blake, you've introduced yourself before. If you wouldn't mind doing so again, and then go ahead.
Hello, I'm Blake Mensing, 1865 Washington Street. I'm a cannabis attorney and former municipal attorney and former Holliston Conservation Commissioner. Just a couple of quick points. What Kate mentioned, yeah, there's a 3-year exclusivity period solely for social equity participants and economic empowerment applicants. And the rationale behind that is essentially the state statutory mandate to do exactly what Kate said, is try to undo some of the wrongs of the failed drug war. It has failed by all objective measures. That's partially because of the cost. It's partially because municipalities aren't obligated to care about that state requirement. And so unfortunately, that's been a barrier. So the 2 flavors of delivery license are lower barriers of entry because it doesn't require as much infrastructure to be built out. And I just want to make one really, really important point. As a citizen in Holliston, I can cultivate cannabis. I can possess it. I can grow it. I can have it delivered here via medical already today, right now. So there's a mechanism by which citizens can receive adult use cannabis at our homes in a private unmarked van with 2 drivers in the vehicle with a body camera on the person actually making the transaction. I don't see any plausible rationale why my neighbor's opinion on cannabis in my household has one thing to do with what I have in my household that I'm already legally allowed to have. So there's a mechanism where you can notify the commission that your citizens can receive cannabis at home that would not require a bylaw change whatsoever. So the bylaw change that Kate was talking about has to do with citing of a business there. And that's the only mechanism by which a town would receive that 3% local option retail tax. Although I want to be really clear, The retail license, the brick and mortar ban, that's for a physical store. That does not have any bearing on an applicant's ability to obtain licenses. You may hold 3 brick and mortar retail licenses and either 2 of the same kind or 1 of each kind of the delivery operator licenses. So it's taxed like a retail, but it's categorically excluded from the retail cap language in the Cannabis Control Commission regulations. I had one other point here. Yeah, so yeah, basically, you can keep your brick and mortar ban, and that invokes all the other things that I know town meeting has been clear about in the past votes. They don't want the storefront attractiveness or, you know, customers coming. Right now, the only difference would be, you know, you have an unmarked van coming to your house. And again, I don't see how that is possibly anyone else's business when I'm allowed to have that product in the home, consume it, et cetera. And then just to be clear, I myself would attempt to open a wholesale delivery operator license in town. I own and operate a retail establishment out in Holyoke. I know that's not available in Holliston today, but I would also support the board's inclusion of a reversal of that ban at the October town meeting. I think, you know, cannabis is here. I think it makes all the sense in the world to get some of the benefits from that revenue stream. And that's all I got.
So that's actually an interesting point too. And so Blake was, without the advocacy piece, Blake was accurate on everything he said. I won't advocate either way, you know, that's up to you all to decide. But on the delivery option, there is that third piece that has nothing to do with the actual businesses that site in the town. You can notify the CCC that you're receptive to delivery. So it may be a delivery company out of Millis or out of Medway or one of the other M's that are near you. It may be coming from that facility, but by notifying the CCC that you are receptive to allowing delivery in Holliston, then the residents could receive that. And you could take the temperature of town meeting on that piece if you wanted. You don't need a town meeting vote, but you could understand what the residents want by getting an advisory opinion sort of on that is a mechanism. I believe we could do it that way.
And what I would just suggest, if you don't want cannabis delivered to your home, don't order it.
Thank you. Is there anybody else on the call who'd like to make public comment? Okay, so Chuck, what are you looking for from us tonight on this? Just, I mean, there was a lot said. We had on the agenda an update. We ended up with a potential town meeting article, so that was a...
No, I mean, I think it's an introduction to a topic that we haven't really heard about very much. I know that Kate and Karen Sherman have had sort of discussions about where we are situated now. We heard a little bit about that tonight, so I think at this point, I'll just come back to you between now and October with anything, and if there's anything specific that you'd like to, I can arrange for sort of planning board and you to have a conversation at a future meeting to discuss the look ahead to October, so that, again, we stay ahead of it, if there's going to be anything on that warrant.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, the one comment I have is I'm looking for a voice that is a subject matter expert on the public health side of it, right? Like, I get the attorney's point of view, I get the business owner's point of view, I get the resident's point of view. The voice that's missing for me personally is the public health advocate. I think we have those resources in town. I welcome their input in a conversation like this. As we look to a town meeting in the fall, potentially prepare an article like this, John, and then please add your comments if you had any, but that would be an ask on my part, is that we can get a subject matter expert engaged in the conversation to talk about the public health considerations for any of these potential decisions.
Yeah, and I think that's reasonable. I think we should have a public discussion about it. I think town meeting is important. If we're going to bring it to town meeting is a great place for some of that discussion, but I think we should have opportunities beforehand to get some of that expertise.
Yeah.
Get people to chime in. Town meeting can be an intimidating place
Right.
to speak up.
Yeah, have a question.
Yeah,
right.
have a question.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you. Kate, did you have anything else you wanted to add for the legislative update?
No, thank you so much for having me, you guys. It was great being here.
appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Bye, Kate.
Thanks, Kate.
Okay, so if we're all set on number 4, we're gonna move on and invite Chief Cassidy up for what used to be the start. I'm getting bumped to number 5 here, the coronavirus community update.
As a result, he's not wearing a tie.
Oh, geez.
His back was going to be to the camera. Nobody would have known.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Given the late hour, I will endeavor to make this as quick as possible. First slide. We've got one new case since last week. So in terms of our numbers, one additional address, and that is located at a single family home. I will repeat what I said last week, which is that several of our, quote, active cases, which are number 8 right now, do date back to early May, cases from May 1st, May 10th, May 19th. So I continue to pester our health department, asking them to find out from our health nursing consultant if those cases can be removed, but have not yet gotten them off our active list. So looking at our graph there, it certainly has plateaued and sort of leveled out there in a very nice pattern. Next slide, looking at our positivity. In comparison to the number of tests, I will remind the board that there is that relationship between number of tests being administered for Holliston residents and our positivity rate in general. So last week, there weren't a lot of tests, so our positivity rate went up, even though we just had one new case. So there is sometimes an inverse relationship there. Well, no, I just want to remind you that don't look at just one data point, but look at it collectively within the context of a lot of the other ones. Then looking at the map, it's very exciting. For the first time since last summer, there are no communities in the REP, which is a long time coming. Looking at our vaccination very quickly, we've now got more than 3/4 of the community are considered to be at least partially vaccinated, and just shy of 2/3 are considered fully vaccinated. And in terms of our partially vaccinated numbers, and this was in an email to the board on Thursday evening, 71% of our 12 to 15-year-olds and more than 100% of our 16 and 19-year-olds. So we are doing a great job with those recently eligible age groups in ensuring that they're getting shots in arms as well. So with that, I will pause and see if there are any questions on the raw data.
Thank you, John.
I don't have any questions, more of a remark, Mike. We are obviously reaching a level where normal seems more appropriate than not. I guess, you know, as somebody's gone through this with you and others over the last year, I'm just keeping an eye on the fall and starting to hear things about boosters and perhaps another variants and so forth. So I don't see you going out of business anytime soon, but as the executive order expires in a week, I still think that we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, but there's still some public health concerns out there that we should not ignore.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. Next week will not be goodbye. I will continue to come in on a regular basis, and obviously anytime there's a significant data point that needs to be shared publicly, obviously I can continue to communicate with the board offline. But if there's something that the public needs to know, I definitely will be coming in here and raising the flag and letting everyone know what I'm concerned about. And oftentimes we share the same concerns.
Bureaucratically, I presume at the end, during your presentation, Mr. Hearn, you'll be giving us an update on the impact of the lapse or the ending of the executive order.
I was just going to say, under coronavirus, number 5 is probably the most appropriate time if we want to get into that now, or I can.
Sure.
Yeah, what can we get into?
So obviously 6/15 is an important date. There have been indications, filings from the governor's office that would extend extend certain provisions from the state of emergency until September 1st. It would allow us to continue to meet as we have been since March of 2020. A number of boards and committees have taken advantage of that. Some people like it. Some people are hoping that it goes away and they can all meet in person again. There's been everybody has a different flavor for it. At the end of the day, where we are right now is an indication that we'll get an extension until September 1st through a temporary fix, with the idea being essentially that we all of these communities are going to need to know how this looks permanently. So actually next week at our meeting will be the night before the state of emergency and our allowances for public meetings will sunset. I have a feeling the 14th will also be the time where we'll get clarity from the state on whether or not the extension to September 1st will go into effect. At this point, though, boards and committees that are going through the clerk's office looking at dates beyond June 15th have to consider physical locations for meetings until that reality comes to fruition. I don't know if you would add anything to that, but so we have a sort of client advisory from the MCC. We're getting prepared for the realization that if that does not come to fruition, we're going back to normal. There have been questions that I've received, the town clerk's office has received, to say, can the select board snap their fingers and allow us to continue this? And the answer is no. It is a legislative fix that's needed. What was allowed for remote participation prior to COVID was really designed to just have one member who couldn't make a meeting if the community had opted in, to allow them to participate in a meeting where the quorum that was present, there was no reality like the one we've been operating under. So again, June 15th is a very important date. We'll be meeting the night before, and I would suspect and hope that by that point, the night before the 15th, that we will have clarity from the governor. And again, that clarity is only temporary to September 1st. So.
I believe the Senate passed a bill today that starting the ball or keeping the ball rolling on the legislative side. Something like a deadline to motivate legislators, so we'll see if it's off the next week.
It certainly wouldn't be the first time that there was action taken concurrently with the board meeting that impacted the board and the community.
Sure.
Guys, any questions?
No.
I have no questions, thank you.
Great, absolutely.
I'll just take Zoom call questions. If you have
Sure.
anybody on the Zoom call with any questions for Chief Cassidy under the coronavirus community update. Okay, so we'll move on to number 6, which is the CARES Act ARPA update.
Just very quickly, we only had 2 additional expenses this past week, which were under hiring and training. And so you see both the graphical representation, the line by line, as well as the pie chart. And those will obviously continue to be put into our weekly update that's published on Thursday evenings. I do have one request this evening for CARES funding that comes to us from our technology director. Because of the uncertainty of this June 15 deadline and what is the legislative fix going to look like, how long is it going to last, is it going to go beyond September, he has requested, just based on the timing of existing licenses, for $1,050, which would be for 3 separate Zoom licenses, that's on an annual basis, and then 1 large account subscription, because currently our existing subscriptions end on June 14th. So that's $150 each for 3 accounts, and then $600 for the large accounts. And I do want to express my deep appreciation to the technology director and to his staff. You see the statistics there. Prior to tonight, there have been 472 meetings that have been facilitated since the pandemic began using the Zoom platform. That's prior to tonight, 876 hours of meetings of committees and boards and department heads and different groups. And we're just shy of 10,000 participants, so I'm not sure if there's going to be a prize or balloons falling from the ceiling when we get to 10,000, but that is the request, and there certainly is still funding available in the CARES balance, and it comes under the accelerated telework capacity category.
I thought the request was going to be for night off, this is not here, but it's a little bit different. So, entertain a motion. Was there any discussion on the request?
I have 2 questions. Do you happen to know if the Zoom license takes us beyond December 31st, 2021?
These would be annual licenses, so these would be until next June.
So the license will extend beyond the eligible funding sources at an allowable expense?
The CARES guidance has indicated that you can apply for annual license that goes beyond the period of performance of the grant.
The other question I have is relative to a request that's not there, but I remember asking Mr. Hearn about, Travis, to envision any additional unemployment costs going against CARES before the end of the fiscal year?
No additional unemployment costs before the end of the fiscal year.
I'm all set, thank you.
I'm almost done with that. I do have one other question.
Okay, so I have no questions.
So I'm going to make a motion.
Yes, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the cost of $1,050 for Zoom 4 or 3, like?
3 annual licenses and 1 large account license. So it's a total of
As
4.
stated, for accelerated telework capacity.
Have a motion made and seconded.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That carries. Thank you very much. Okay, did you have another question for us?
Yeah, I have one question. The CARES money in general,
Yes.
as things are kind of changing and shifting and things like that, do we have a plan? We still have a balance there.
Yes.
Like, how are we moving forward, or do we have a?
So just as we've got an ARPA steering group, we did already have a CARES working group of key stakeholders to ensure that we've got a plan to move the town and all of its various departments, not only through the end of the current fiscal year, but to get us to the off-ramp in December. So yes, we've got some plans.
Depending on scenarios, the June 30th deadline of our municipal budget as opposed to the CARES deadline of December, we may see some activity depending on circumstances at the end of the fiscal year. I've been in touch with some of the larger departments, such as the school department staff, so I would anticipate, but all of those, again, would go through the various boards and committees before they get to you. And so with that, is because it was mentioned in this, let me just also mention my thought at the moment for the ARPA steering group, as currently envisioned, would be that we would begin the meeting process after the school committee regroups, which they do after graduation. And so at that point, we would get that group together, look at some sort of messaging out to all the boards and committees that we'd be reaching out to, sort of saying, here are the guidelines, sort of look within the things that you think you would like to bring to the group, and start the outreach process. So I would hope to be doing that, in the coming weeks. So I know that seems far away, but at the same point, ARPA is through 2024. I think, in the grand scheme, we're keeping ahead of it.
We're all set. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and then quickly on the ARPA, there is I know there are so many facets to what I get to brief you on. There is a webinar that I've signed up for on Thursday, which goes over the application process for ARPA. So possibly as soon as next Monday, I could be coming to the board seeking a motion to authorize the chair to sign the application for our first tranche. But there's no rush to that, but just understand that as we have a better handle on everything that's involved in that application, we could start that ball rolling, but we don't need to fast track that, and if we need to pump the brakes, we can as well.
Okay. I have no other questions. I think we're all set. So thanks for the update, and we will see you on the 14th.
Oh, you'll absolutely see me on the 14th.
And
That's a big one.
yeah, that's
Yes.
actually what
See that?
All right, so moving on, do we have a warrant for this evening?
We do. We have a warrant that totals $1,701,190.58.
Do we have a second for the warrant?
Oh, I'll make a motion to approve that.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, that's the warrant. Moving on to public comments. John, do you have any public
All
comments?
set this week, thank you.
Ben?
Hello?
None for me. Hello, public comment from the Zoom callers. If you have some, please state your name and your address, and then go for it.
Okay, am I on, or I just...
We can hear you.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, hi. It's Beth Hoffer calling from 184 Winthrop Street. And I'm calling about a couple of different things. One, of course, is the water treatment plant. The board had promised that the project page would be kept up to date on the website for this project. And the last update was February 2nd. So were you planning on only doing it on a quarterly basis?
Let me hand that off to Travis on...
That should be updated, and I'll take care of that, as for the update to be posted tomorrow.
Okay, so update will be posted tomorrow.
Well, I have to wait 2 hours on the phone to make sure this thing gets updated. I mean, no one noticed. It hasn't been updated since February 2nd. And this is supposed to be a top priority, I keep being told. So anyway, the February 2nd posting said that a notice of award would be made in April. Did that happen?
Sure, the notice of award was made. We had an update in front of the board, which should have been added online, and I apologize that it wasn't, related to breaking ground in May and the 360-day timeline in the contract. That would keep us on track with the schedule that was posted at that time, which is to have the plant within 360 days of the contract from April to April of 22, with water as had been indicated, treated and then reviewed by DEP and online in the summer of 22.
Thanks, Travis. John, did you have?
Yeah, Beth, no, I just wanted to pass along, well, you know, I've always admired your fastidious interest in the treatment plant and the process. Just to add that because the matter has not received an update in 4 months doesn't mean that the board has not otherwise engaged in the public process. The status of the project has been publicly discussed at our meeting.
Okay.
So with respect to disclosure, I hear you on the website, but our board talked about it publicly, and I know you probably haven't been to all of them, but we have brought it forth to the public view.
Okay, well, it's just that I was told by the board that it would be kept up to date, and that was my point of reference, was to look at the website, because, you know. You're
absolutely right.
And once before, I mean, it hadn't been updated in a year because nothing had been done, so I was, you know. So I also, moving on to another project that's going on in town, which is the replacement of the water mains. I was just wondering, you know, what the budget is for that.
So I'm going to pass that off to Travis. Beth, I'm not sure if you're referring to what was approved at town meeting for current water main replacements or future town meeting appropriations for future water main replacements.
Well,
can you be a little bit more specific?
Sure, because I mean, I might have a simplistic understanding of the project because just, you know, I was told that the town is, you know, over years and years and years, all the water mains, you know, we have started replacing all of the water mains. Like that has started, and because of the age of the infrastructure, if I'm using the right terminology, they all basically need to be replaced. So, and then my understanding also is that I have a fee on my water bill that for me personally, like either triple or quadrupled my water bill, and that was to raise money to put toward the water main replacement. So is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes, and so we have two. I'll take a stab at this if I may, and then Travis can jump in and add more or correct me if I missed anything. So we have two processes undergoing. One is the Winter Street water main replacement. That is a current project. And the second is the water main replacement study, which is ongoing. And we do not yet have the report for that. When we do have the report, that will be a publicly held discussion here at the select board meeting. So there's two.
Well, then how did the town reach the amount charged on each water bill, like what the fee needed to be to fund a project that it sounds like you're still doing a study for? Is that correct?
No, the study is to determine the future rate and capital improvement planning for the remaining water main replacements. The fee is covering the water main replacements done to date and currently ongoing.
Beth, the fee that you're paying was put in place by a prior board. It's a flat fee that generates approximately $1 million a year in additional revenue. And the idea behind it was it would allow the town to replace about a mile of pipe per year, give or take. And that's the plan that the town has been using for the last 5 years or so.
Okay. So, okay, I've been on, hold for 2 hours, so I'm so tired at this point that, okay. And Travis, I think I'd like to talk to you some more, outside of this meeting, but, because a year ago, you sent a crew out or a crew was sent out last summer, I believe it was, because the thought was that if I was moved from the 2-inch main to the 6-inch main, that my problem might improve. But then when they started digging, they found out I was already on the 6-inch main. Is that correct?
I think what you're referring to, when I came out, I believe it was in November. At that point, work had been done on the corner. As it goes around, the 6-inch main becomes a 2-inch main as it extends, or a 2-inch service line as it extends to houses down the road. I'm not sure.
Okay, well, I mean, that's just part of my concern, because I talked to someone at the federal EPA who identified what you are now calling a service line as definitely a main. And so if we're spending all this money on a water main project and we don't even know the difference between, or, can't, like for a few months it's a water main and then it becomes a service line, and anybody looking at the plans say, like that's definitely a water main. And yet now the town is contending that it's a service line, and we're spending millions of dollars on a project, and it seems like, I don't understand why we don't know what's what. But I can talk to you outside of this meeting about that.
Within the water modernization plan, certainly all of the mains would be looked at, including that one. The 6-inch that goes to the 2-inch line. I would certainly expect that we would get some information on that. And, for future projects beyond the Winter Street one that's currently underway, hopefully what the idea and the items that you brought forward to the town would be prioritized with that information. But we are awaiting that report that was initiated by the December town meeting, and so hopefully that will answer a lot of questions.
And Beth, where you do have specific questions, I'm going to ask if you would put them in writing or in a phone call to Travis so that he has time to be able to look into the details and get back to you with a thorough response.
Okay, so the study, could you tell me a little more about when, has someone been hired to do that study yet?
Yes, we've hired a company called Stantec that's doing the study for us, and they're in the process of it. I actually met with them today about another part of of one of the other pieces that they're studying, and they.
Okay, that's fine. I'll talk to you about outside of this meeting, and then I just had one more question, and then I'll let you go because I know it's getting late.
Okay. Thanks, Beth. Go ahead.
I was just curious. I think it's great. So I'm not questioning that part of it. Like sometimes there's a flag on front of town hall or whatever. And I was just wondering, does the town have a process in place for organizations or anyone who might want to hang something on the front of town hall? Like, is there an application process, perhaps? The application is on the website?
No, it's not an application process. Any request to do something like hang a flag on town hall would come to the town administrator's office and be considered by the board. There's no application process.
Okay, so, and you have no policy in place for it?
We take it as they come in, so if there's a request, the board discusses that request that's in front of us.
Okay, so you might want to talk to your town attorney about that, that's all, because I just don't want to end up paying for a lawsuit, so. Okay, great. Well, thank you for your time and all your hard work. I know you do this every week, and I have to commend you on that. So thank you very much for listening. Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, so moving on, is there any other public comment?
I forgot one. I had to read
sorry.
this will be posted on our website. Holliston Household Hazardous Waste Day is scheduled for Saturday, July 10th, 2021, from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. or until capacity is reached. It will be held at the Robert Adams Middle School at 323 Woodland Street. Access is through the Placentino Miller parking lot at 235 Woodland Street. The products that will be accepted will be listed on our website. This looks very similar to what we've seen in past years. It's a very popular event. We'll probably try to make additional notices up to that date to keep people informed, but mark your calendar, Saturday, July 10th, Hazardous Waste Day here in Holliston. Thank you, Ken.
Okay, thank you. I think we're all set then, unless there's no other caller, and I don't see any. So we're going to move on to comments from the town administrator and then board business.
I actually have a few things under other business. The only thing I think would be under comments from the town administrator was mentioned earlier, which is that we are waiting a final decision on what was initiated by the governor to extend the remote meeting capabilities that we've had since last March. And for those who have continued to ask questions of when that will be in place, my hope is that next Monday night when we're meeting, we'll have a definitive answer for people and to hang in there. But we can't move that mountain at the moment. I guess the only other two things I mentioned, we'll get the ARPA steering group together very shortly, and also the seating of the Comprehensive Long Range Plan Committee. It's about 80% complete. We are waiting on a few groups that are still meeting in the coming 10 days that will put their designee onto the CLRPCA, which is what I'm calling it. But the Comprehensive Long Range Plan Committee, that committee does have its own webpage now, which shows its charge as it was created by town meeting in May, and the members that will be filled in as they're designated. And then I have a few items under other business, so I will wait for those.
Okay, so any questions for the town administrator? From John or Ben, anyone in the room or anyone on the Zoom call? So seeing none, we'll move on to the very next thing, board business. I think, John, this is your show.
A little bit. So the first item is a donation from Holliston to Brett to the Senior Center. It's in support of the Senior Nutrition Program. This board's seen this donation come across our desk many times. Very generous program. In this case, Holliston to Brett is donating $400 to account 295541-45650, the Nutrition Fund. I'll make a motion to accept this generous donation of $400 to the Holliston Senior Center.
Second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
That motion carries. Okay, next is the special town meeting posting for October 18th, 2021. Travis, do you want to lead off with that?
Well, let me just pull it up. Someone has it as well. So Article 10 of the annual town meeting this year. So what we do is before the end of December is the way that this is written. We post this, which specifies the dates of the annual town meeting in the coming year, including the town election. So as you see, May 10th and May 25th have already passed, but what we're doing is updating something that had been previously put in this notice of town meeting, which was that the date was Monday, October 25th, 2021. The Article 10, which was adopted at the May 10 town meeting, I believe that was on May 10th, not May 11th, the second night of annual town meeting. It was adopted the first night, and that was Article 10, and that changed the way that we initiate the fall or special town meeting in October. And so this year it changes it from October 25th to October 18th. And so what you would be doing tonight is approving the amendment to this. As you see, it was originally posted December 21, 2020. As we looked ahead on the calendar with the town clerk, and this would revise the post as of June 7th, so that date is updated from October 25th to October 18th.
You want to vote on it, Travis?
Yes, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the notice of the 2021 annual town meeting to reflect a new meeting to be held on Monday, October 18th, 2021.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
That carries. Okay. And I think that's all that we have under board business. So we will move on to the last agenda item, which is other business. And Travis, you said you had a couple things that you wanted to bring.
Yeah, so actually the first one, since I think he's been here since 8 o'clock, is Mr. Blair has brought a couple things to our attention as he is preparing for the farmers market that the board entered into a license with he and his group to put on in Blair Square farmers market. So actually, if you'd like to, I know there was, I think, another item besides the one that you and I discussed, which was an entertainment license. So the question was music, live music, and I'll let Mr. Blair sort of get into that. I guess the mechanism for the board to consider would be an entertainment license, which does have a $100 fee, which the board has the ability to waive if you so choose. But the real question I think that Mr. Blair would like to have with you or discussion with you is sort of the appropriateness, how you feel about that, if it's going to impact anybody in the surrounding areas or anything you'd like him to consider as he looks at that.
Bobby Blair, School Street. I was approached by a gentleman over here on Elm Street. I didn't know him, Joe Viskowski, and he's in a band. As a matter of fact, he's in 2 bands, and he offered to play at the farmer's market, for free, no less. So, I understand I need an entertainment license. I'm under no illusions that people might have their windows open. It is summertime. So I'd like your thoughts on that. The first band is called Big Chief Band, and they play rhythm and blues. He plays with Jim Peasy Band. Dr. Peasy was a dentist here in town on Smith's Row. And they were up at the last time I heard them was like all the songs from the year I graduated, so it's not a rap band or anything like that. So he also offered, he's in contact with a lot of other musicians that would offer their music for free for the rest of the summer, so at no charge. So I know Ashland does it. I don't know if they get any complaints. So
You are looking for an entertainment license week by week? You're looking for an entertainment
well,
license?
I think the way, and he's working, with other people, I don't want to have to come back every single week.
It is an annual license, actually. The way that we do an entertainment license would be for a year for the 100. So again, the 100 could be waived up to you, but it would be for the year. So you'd essentially be authorizing it for that period of time.
And that way, if someone bails out, we just don't have music that week.
Okay. Would the entertainment license specify hours of music?
You can do that. Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, if right now the hours of the farmers market, can you just remind everybody?
9 to 1. I don't think they'd want to play for 4 hours.
Yeah.
But sure. So.
Right. So I mean, I with that, do you think? I mean, a 10, 11 o'clock start time makes sense, or something like that? 10?
I would leave it open from 10 to 12. I mean, and if they don't want to play to 12, then they don't. That's all.
Okay, so does John have any questions?
Question I have is, do we have a bylaw on noise?
We do. The bylaw that we have is really, I mean, it's geared towards, yard companies doing work too early, and it would not fall in the category of the time frame that we're talking about, which starts at 9 for the farmers market. So it's really, when it comes to if you want to put anything within the entertainment license, it would be, don't start before 10 o'clock kind of thing, would just be within your purview. It's not under the bylaw.
Got it. I personally have no problem with this, but I agree with Bobby. I think we have to be sensitive to abutters. This year is kind of proof of concept of what he's trying to do, so if we run into any problems, we'll deal with them. But at this point, I think we would probably try to restrict the noise to after 10 a.m. And then, you're going to have an officer on detail, so if there's any problems, we can go through him or you to report back to the board. So that's the way I'd go with it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. Public input when necessary. But my only question for Bobby is, are they going to be plugging in? Yeah. Okay.
That was my question. And then my other question was, who's Mr. Blair? But,
I'm just shocked that Mr. Blair doesn't know somebody in town.
So the other consideration is to waive the license fee of $100.
I'll make a motion to waive the licensing fee associated with the farmers market and entertainment license.
Second on that? Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye. You have to fill out an application, right?
We'll take care of that.
Administratively, that'll. Okay.
And the other thing I'm here for, I kind of jumped the gun on this one, but then I thought, well, I'd better ask.
Here comes the forgiveness part.
I'd like to hang up some more hanging baskets, and they would be for that end of town. People have been very generous. The American Legion Downtown Marigold project this year. They get too nervous when I have too much money in the account. I'm not going anywhere, so I purchased 10 brackets, and I have 10 hanging baskets coming. They're expensive devils, and every once in a while you see the cocoa matting underneath. I have to replace that. And I think the process I went through the last time I took the police chief out, I think it was John Moore at the time, they looked okay. They would be hung parallel to the street.
Which street? Which street?
Washington Street, at Cole Court.
Oh, okay.
6 of them, and 4 of them at Messini Corner, Concord and Washington. And by stepping back, you can make sure that they're not in the line of sight of someone making a turn.
So in the past, you've gone to the chief of police. The chief of police had walked with you. Someone from the police department had walked with you.
I suppose can have
Yeah, who put them up, Bobby? Maybe the highway? Yeah, because they're up there, right? Are they 15 feet up?
No, we try not to put them up. We try to put them up at a decent height, but not too high because you got to water them.
Okay.
Are you say in brackets, you mean the swan neck bracket that holds it to
Right.
posts? You
Right.
don't need the posts you've already identified?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Well, they're already there,
Okay.
so,
You're not installing any additional posts?
no.
You just, okay.
No, originally, even before I had these I put brackets on the telephone poles, and they only came out, and they, just about every single one got knocked down by tractor trailers pulling in, bang. So that's why they put up parallel with the street.
So I think it'll be, well, first of all, it's a generous donation, I'll say that. Those things aren't cheap. But it'll be beneficial, I think, to have highway put them up. So, if it's okay with you, I'll make a motion to accept the donation and ask our highway department to assist with the installation for the beautification of Holliston.
Do you have a second for that?
I'll second that.
I like it. Say aye. All in favor?
Aye.
Say aye.
I don't want Tom Smith at my house. What are you doing?
Go for it. Good luck.
Right.
Thanks. Have a great night.
Take care.
Yep. Thanks, Bobby.
I think you have one more under other business?
I do. I have 2. So one thing, it does not require a vote, but I thought it would be good to have it also by way of an update to the board. We had gone through the One Stop for Growth notice of intent phase. We put 4 projects forward. The applications, or the notice of intent phase essentially allowed them to give us feedback for strength of applications, which we received and I shared with the board at a previous point. The deadline to submit an actual application, so going from notice of intent to application, was this past Friday. We did submit an application for $27,500 for the housing production plan to benefit the planning board and the housing trust. This is a plan that the town has, which is is expired, and it's one that I think will benefit the Comprehensive Long Range Planning Committee. It's one that, is really something that the town should have updated. So while the other projects that we had put in our notice of intent phase of One Stop for Growth, are projects that I still feel we're going to want to pursue, the application went in for the housing production plan. And so it's really one that, benefits another group in town, but I think, a vote in favor of that application from the select board would be good. And I would also note my appreciation for the willingness of Senators Pilka and Rep. Dykeman's office to follow up with the state on that application in support, as they have always been very supportive of our efforts. And so I think that would be great. The number, $27,500, is based on some research that has been previously done. We've tried to go for funding of this in previous iterations, last through the MAPC. So The one-stop program, is new this year, the way they've been doing it. I think it's working. We're getting feedback on the state, and this is the one that they felt was the best application, so we put it in. So just a vote from the board in support of the application, even though it's in, would be appreciated, and I think, show support in the need that the support understands for a housing production plan.
Okay, so, we are looking for a motion to support the community one-stop for growth application for $27,500 for a housing production plan.
Yes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Travis, do we expect additional one-stop applications beyond housing? Because that program covers a breadth of programs, consolidated bureaucratic solution.
Yeah, so some of the feedback actually on I'll use the Whitney-Washington interchange as an example. We got pointed in the direction of what they felt would be the best funding source for it. That funding source has a different application deadline, and so it does not sort of remove us from pursuing that particular opportunity, and it's one that I'll continue to discuss with Rep. Dykeman's office. There was another item that we had that sort of would have overlapped with, it would have hit the similar notes of the housing production plan, and so the feedback that we got from the one-stop program was, you have two applications here that kind of fall in the same category. The housing production plan is a much better, has a much better chance of being awarded. So it was helpful. I think that, they're taking feedback from communities that it's difficult to navigate some of these programs. And, especially if we get this funding, then I'll feel even better about the changes they've made. And lastly, this came to my attention as a new member of the Finance Committee who cannot sit on other committees, is still a seated member of the Golf Course Clubhouse Committee. In my discussions with the town clerk and that individual, it sounds like there's some T's to cross and dots to I in terms of the final sort of all the minutes and the report that had been issued in a draft form to make those final. But other than that, if the select board were to dissolve the Golf Course Clubhouse Committee, that would resolve the issue. If the select board would like to keep it in place because it may have a purpose in the future as its current iteration, then I would just have to, I could deal with this gentleman getting off. But at this point, it seems as though dissolving it as we did with the 9 Green Street Committee would solve the issue if everybody's in that headspace.
John, I think you have the longest history with that committee. How do you see
My first reaction is he should probably resign from the committee. That would be the quickest solution. The second thing is that committee had some depth to it. We were looking at them to do some work on the future of the clubhouse and so forth. So before this board makes any such decision, I think we should get the Golf Course Advisory Committee's feedback on whether or not they have any interest in pursuing some of those projects, Travis. And if they don't, then we can take action. But I'd take guidance from them if you guys work for the same idea.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's, I agree with John, but let's see if they want to continue.
But Jay can resign.
Yeah.
I will say that at 33 committees, having one less.
Appealing.
I will continue to bring you opportunities to dissolve committees. You can bank on that.
I can think of at least 2 that I'd like to dissolve right now.
Okay. We can work on that. But that's all I have.
Do you want me to make a motion? I mean,
Yeah, it is getting late.
9:42. Yeah. No. Okay. No, that's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, John, any other business?
No, ma'am.
Okay, Ben?
Yes, I have one thing. I met today with Stantec, representatives from Stantec. I had Sean and I, DPW Director Sean Reeves and I, met with Erica, Victor, and Bill from Stantec, and they were bringing up some of their findings from the sidewalk study, and they wanted a little bit of feedback before they were ready to put together their final recommendations and presentation. They just to give a high-level overview, just they were talking about they've completed the data inventory. There's a couple other things that we had to point out to them because they were using DOT GIS and there was some things that were missing, so we're getting that fixed. They evaluated the conditions of all the sidewalks. They also looked at ramps They gave us an estimate for repairing all of the sidewalks with existing materials. And they are working on, one of the things that I wanted to ask this board about was they wanted a network priority ranking. And part of what they need to know is what they should use as the areas that are of particular concern for us as to what proximity to what particular landmarks or anything like that in the community. And what I had said to them, and what I think is a starting point for us, is that there were 4 things that I brought up to them, and that is proximity to downtown, proximity to parks, there's no particular order by the way, proximity to rail trails, and schools. And so what I wanted to see from you was, how would you rank them? How would we feel about ranking them? And then what is a reasonable buffer? Is it 500 feet from those, 1,000 feet, something like that? And then they would basically work their way out to create a priority list for the repairs.
This is repairs, this is not new, this is just repairs?
It should be, there might be some gaps,
Okay.
but most of it is repairs, is being able to prioritize the repairs.
And this is all sidewalk infrastructure, crosswalks, ramps, all of it?
Correct.
And is this ready to be put on an agenda through the chair?
So one of the last piece would be they're looking at hopefully having something finalized. There's a little bit, they're going to need to push back their timeline a little bit. So probably end of July, they will have a product for us. So I was thinking if we could have an agenda item in early August. That's what we're right now. That we could potentially have them in to discuss their findings and go through things. Part of the product in having the network priority ranking, I believe, should be a 10-year and a potentially 20-year plan on how to go about these repairs. Obviously, it would dovetail in with, if we're doing a water main there, if they're doing other kinds of projects and things like that, but this would give us sort of a framework to work from so we can start planning how to address some of these issues.
Are you looking for the feedback tonight, or?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Sure. I have layered thoughts. So the first is, what I would love to see from Stantec is a visual diagram of Holliston that shows where all the existing sidewalks are.
Show you that. Okay.
Once we have that inventory, we can see it. I'm going to guess there are areas and spaces within our community where the sidewalks go nowhere. We've heard about neighborhoods being built over the generations where developers had to put sidewalks in, but there was no connectivity to it.
Yes.
So to the extent that the plan can then take the next leap and begin adding in sidewalk connectivity towards parks, schools, rail trails, and downtown, that's great. Now I'm seeing lines being drawn on a map that has existing infrastructure. Once that's done, I'd also like to identify which of those streets are state highways, because I think you said DOT GIS. You want to make sure that whatever we're touching, we own. More specifically, what we don't own, because the whole state highway thing is a separate task.
Yes.
And then finally, I'm not that enthusiastic about a repair program. I'm enthusiastic about building a network. I want to see not just sidewalks repaired, I want sidewalks connected to the network that draws people to the center of town. So if we have this image and we see all of these lines connected, I want to make sure that there's not one neighborhood that is like on the outlier because it's more than 1,000 feet away that doesn't have the benefit of having a pathway into the network.
I did ask them about trying to identify those particular types of connections. I think part of the challenge is a lot of what they're trying to do is asset management to be able to maintain our assets. And part of that isn't necessarily creating new assets to maintain. Part of that, although there is an importance to doing that. And I can show you about that.
So that's my feedback. But I concur your 4 areas are compelling, and I would use those as a guidepost.
Okay.
But I want to emphasize again, neighborhoods have to be the connected pieces that draw into those spaces that you just described.
So don't disagree at all with what John had to say. We'll take a different layered approach and say ADA compliance with public safety would be a focus, right? That we are looking to prioritize areas where we have any non-compliance or public safety concerns. I am sure it's in any one of those 4 areas where we have those concerns. So I'm going to put that out there because to come into compliance and address public safety is a pretty significant issue and benefit. The other one I would layer onto that is where do we benefit most from economic activity by making those improvements or those interconnections. So a little bit different than a geographic area and more of a focus on public safety and improving economic activity or enhancing economic activity by bringing people into.
That's why I had downtown on that list.
Right, it makes a lot of sense. I would argue the rail trail as well, but
Yes.
But and I would argue too that with the schools and parks, you're talking about public safety concerns, and I just don't know where the ADA non-compliant grants are. And that's concerning to me because that is pretty significant. And we need to be addressing that.
That's the ramp. Basically, a ramp is going to be there, and then a lot of what they do, and not to get too in the weeds on this, and I can certainly share some of this information with you, but they talk about, they talk about the ADA compliance. Like if there's obstructions or if there's any issues or challenges.
Didn't we ask them to also identify any potential grants that might be available directly?
Yes, I talked to them about grants, and we talked about complete streets, and we talked about safe routes to schools. They weren't as familiar with share streets and spaces, but those are smaller grants anyway, by comparison. But I asked them to see if they had any further grants that they could identify and help us pursue.
And I think I'll get an update tomorrow, but I believe the Safe Routes to School program is going to start up again their big infrastructure grant program, which last time I remember was up to $1 million in infrastructure improvements. So that may be in Holliston future. I think that early August agenda item would be good. Okay. Did we give you the feedback you were looking for?
Yes. If I forgive you, downtown parks, rail trail, and schools, what would you say? Would you say like schools number 1?
Say number 1, and number 1.
I mean, I could say that they should all have the same. If you want to, they all have the same, the same level.
I think what you're hearing is a hesitancy to prioritize because all 4 of those areas are part of a narrative that fits in one sentence. It's part of pedestrian access to parks, to schools, to downtown, and so forth.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's fine. I think, the way I visualize it is a little different than what they're presenting. So I'm going to hold off any criticism or critique of what they're doing because I see the presentation, but I would love to see the neighborhoods connected. It's got to be beyond maintenance. And
but I think part of that, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but part of this is they're telling us, like, here's what you need to do to work on your on what you need to do on your infrastructure, and then we as a community have to make those decisions and say, we want to put one here, and we see there's a gap there, and they can help us and identify some of the gaps and say, look, that's something potential. I think we as a community have to make that decision. If we had that conversation about Winter Street, is it worth the cost? That would be really fantastic. I'll give them that feedback and make sure that they do that.
Right.
And there will be areas that hit all of it. Right?
Absolutely.
So if you talk about Linden Street, right out of the gate, you've got downtown, extend the sidewalk all the way down Linden Street next to the schools, and then it brings you right over to the rail trail. So
absolutely.
There'll be areas that
hit everything, and there'll be areas that are.
In terms of a 10 to 20-year plan, right, the things that hit these 4 groups are probably going to end up getting prioritized by the nature of the more that they impact and those types of things. I guess the question that I would say is, before August, if the visual that they provided in a relatively large map could be presented just as an agenda item for people to sort of see an update, knowing that a full update and presentation was coming. I mean, the more people can visualize these things, because I think, everybody has a vision in their head of sort of what we're moving towards here, but an actual visual can get people all on the same page.
And they're going to have the final report before the presentation. They'll have a draft report too.
I do have a burning question. Did they give you a cost per linear foot for repairs versus new?
I have a cost per linear foot. It's actually not linear per foot. You want to look at it by square footage. Depends on what you're using.
Oh, for the type of material.
material.
Right, okay.
Very different.
Yeah, okay, all right. Anything else? Other business? I'm all set, so.
Motion to adjourn. I'll second it.
All in favor, aye?
Aye. Aye.
All right, good night, Holliston. Thank you very much for hanging in this. Bear with us for 3 hours just about, and we will see you next Monday. Take care.